Welcome, everybody, to Bridge the Divide. Yes, I am live. I am live here with my good friend, Jefferson Spatchcock, here for the 2024 vice presidential debate between Tim, the coach Walz, and JD, the couch Vance. So...
Putting the love seat.
Put love seat. That's right. Oh
yeah.
Why is the seat so sticky? Anyway, I hope you're all doing fantastic. Do what?
Can't peel these cushions apart. What's going on?
Oh man, I hope you all are doing fantastic tonight. Welcome to everybody who's new here. This is Bridge the Divide. I am JL, so I appreciate you hanging out for a live chat. For this big stream, we are streaming the vice presidential debate tonight between Governor Tim Walz, and that JD Vance, weird person, guy. I have no idea. But nonetheless, I think it's going to be okay. So, before we dive into anything, let me go ahead and get this out of the way before this thing gets too big. So, I see a bunch of people in the live chat, a bunch of names I recognize. I want to say hi to them real fast. Randolph Richardson, good to see you. Surf, good to see you as well. Marcus Dresden, good to see you. UDEF as well. I am Jedi1, Steve6464, Sherry Tilly, thank you so much for being here tonight. Rasheen, Elizabeth S., Daniel Cooper, good to see you. Super J Live has been a member for 18 months of the Godless Army. Thank you so much, Super J Live. You rock. I appreciate that support. Karis 2030, I Killed Earl is in the house. Good to see you, Earl. Appreciate you being here. Late Night is here. Says go Coach Walz. Fuck yeah, run it to the end zone. Take it in. Anonymous Pie is here. Good to see you. Jake, insert clever dapper inside joke here. Nelson is here. Good to see you, Jake. Appreciate you hanging out. Says, is this one going to be a debate or a beatdown like Harris and Trump? So we're going to talk about that here briefly, real quick. We're going to dive into that because Jefferson and I were chatting kind of like before this, we were setting this whole thing up, and so we'll get there. Web 3D, good to see you. Javers as well. Peter Noddle, thanks so much for hanging out. Facties here says, not that I care, but is the Orange Man out? Not yet. But at least we did find out that he said if he loses, obviously we're going to go through the whole it was rigged and all that other bullshit. It was like they stole the election again because it's always a conspiracy if it doesn't go his way. But he has stated that if he loses, he's not going to run again. So if we can make it through this, there no more Trump in politics. Fingers crossed. Just no more. I don't care. It's just all fingers crossed. I don't even care if the next one is like if Kamala wins and it's like Kamala versus Mitch McConnell. I don't care so long as it's not him. Okay,
as long as Mitch McConnell does that stare off into the distance thing.
turtle.
She's in for another 4 years. That's fine.
The Grim Reaper. That Grim Reaper's hovering over him.
I feel like someone walked over my grave.
Well, I know, right?
Yeah.
Scott Duke, good to see you. Thanks so much for being here. Jester Lord of Fools, God equals square root of -1. Harris 2024, yes sir. And I think really is it really? Yeah, I see you really here. Good to see you, bud. Super J Live, good to see you as well. Royzna, Fwagan's minion, Keller, says, will JD Vance succeed in pretending to be a human? I honestly think that this man is 3 raccoons in a human costume. I'm starting to think that it's like, I saw a cartoon, I saw a webcomic that was of a guy like doing something, and you hear a voice bubble come inside and says, hey, love, and he's like, yeah, and it shows a girl, like a woman, like in the kitchen. Like, where's the trash can? He's like, oh, it's under the sink. Wait a minute. I'm not married. And he pulls the mask up and it's a raccoon underneath her. He's like, I'm not married. So reveals raccoons. It's like, aha. So
I want to place a debate or a thing here. I don't know how deep of a reference this is, especially if you're not a big Simpsons fan. But will we figure out by the time this debate is over, is JD Vance Kang or Kodos? please Google that if you're not sure. And Google the mid-90s one where they replaced Bill Clinton and Bob Dole for the election. It's hilarious.
Yes. Oh, Witch of Hearts says, JL, what happened to your beard? Yes, I needed a little bit of a change, and it had to come down. So there's a bit of a story behind it. You know, it was Week in Horror. We officially concluded Week in Horror a few weeks ago, and I was kind of in the mood. It was like, maybe a change is good. Maybe a change is kind of like, sometimes you want to cut your hair, and move on to the next thing. And it was long, and I was working out in the backyard. Now that I have more free time, I was doing some stuff in the backyard. I was removing some old chain link fence. I had some old rusted chain link fence in my backyard.
Oh, no.
In the back property I needed to get rid of. So I'm out there like pulling it out of the ground and, kind of cutting everything. And a section of it, a big, like long section of it, swung and caught my beard and almost took it with it. So I took that as kind of like, yeah, I think I'm decided. I think I'm going to take it down for a second. Luckily, no spiders in the beard. So there was no spider visitations in the beard to inspire me to cut it. It just, plus I didn't realize I've had a bunch of people comment that the Greek philosopher look really didn't suit me. So even though a lot of comments said they loved the beard. Yeah, it's like, that's like the Greek, like the ancient Greek philosopher, like I'm sitting back, toga wise. You're wrong. So
look, I liked the fact that you had the kind of drapey beard that you could do like the Gordon Liu thing from like the Kung Fu movies.
Yes.
Toss that like with
I can do all the time. Be like well, thank you, Witch of Heart. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Steve 64 says even with Trump out there will still be those that think that would be good for the USA. True, agreed. Yeah, just because he goes doesn't mean MAGA is going to vanish. But I do believe, like any other like cultist mentality, it'll eventually diminish in time. It will. It'll eventually go away once they realize that jail is as Socrates. Yes, I could have played Socrates. I could have. I really could have. But there you go, Bill and Ted. It's Bill and Ted. It's under Socrates. So what the shit was? Yes. So if Kamala wins and she's in office with Walz, and they realize that the world is not going to implode as though the core of the planet birthed a black hole, that's not going to happen. Okay, once they recognize that, as you see, anytime people are up in arms, then all of a sudden a massive sweeping change occurs. They realize it's not as bad as they thought it was going to be, and so that will inevitably be what happens. Should they win, I'm fingers crossed that they win. So, Steve Thompson, good to see you. All is well. Appreciate that. Thank you very much. But yeah, so we were talking before, and I have to admit, I'm a little nervous. I am a little nervous about this debate. I don't know if this is going to be like the solid trouncing that she gave Trump, that Harris gave Trump when we will, back in September. I have no idea if that's going to go down like this. We've got JD Vance, who is ostensibly insane, and then we have Tim Walz, who is kind of like, down to earth Midwest boy, but I don't know. I don't want to predict anything because I don't want to look crazy.
Yeah, I think it's anybody's guess how this one's going to work. I think we'll know within a few minutes of them giving their opening statements how things are going to start to go. So here's my my real, and I biffed this part, the last one. I was really, really skeptical. I did not think that Trump was going to mention anything about the Springfield pet eater. And not
they're
only
eating the dogs and the cats.
He did it. It was the highlight of the debate. It was super memeable. It went viral almost immediately. There were T-shirts within 24 hours.
Memed like that. The AI images that just proliferated across the internet. It's just like of like little like kittens and puppies like arming themselves in
I'm starting to think that anybody that could like superimpose him saying that with old video footage of their cat looking alarmed or their dog in trouble, they would superimpose it on there and be like, yes, I'm jumping on the bandwagon. If their campaign is as desperate as I think they are, and all coverage is good coverage, then maybe they will have him like double down on that. But I really can't tell I mean, I don't know like what their strategy is going to be for him going into this. If they want him to play the smarter, policy oriented, more even keeled one,
do what Trump
or,
is not doing on the campaign trail.
Yeah. Or if they're going to be like, you know what? Trump it up. I don't know. I just don't know.
It's interesting if he were to do that, if he were to take that strategy and like double down on the whole like Springfield, the Springfield claims, stuff like that. He's already admitted, and I caught this via Brian Tyler Cohen. He already admitted during an interview that story was made up in order to what he says that it was a strategy, that the story itself was made up in order to get the media looking at something that they thought was important. Is like, you need to be looking at this, but you're refusing to look at it because you're corrupt and you're blah blah blah. So I'm going to make up an insane story and get you to look at that, but it didn't turn out the way he wanted, because what he wanted them to look at wasn't as important, and it wasn't a major issue that he thought it was. And then everybody just memed out the crazy story, and then when people realized, oh, it's bullshit, it kind of went away. So he didn't get anything other than making this team look absolutely nuts.
Yeah, and I really don't think that it did anything for for the most part. Like any of the viral spread of it was entirely just belly laughing, pointing and laughing. Like, oh, did you see the insane shit that just fell out of this guy's face on that stage? So yeah, it'll be interesting. Vance is a little bit of a gaffe machine himself too, so it'll be interesting to see.
I'm wondering if the team, given that knowledge, how quick, because if he gets flustered, he tends to like jump really quick, and so if they're going to approach it, if like the team behind, if like the team that's behind Harris and Walz, if her strategy worked brilliantly, bait this motherfucker, draw him out, get there are key terms that he triggers on. So get those out there and just basically wind him up and watch him run. If Walz is going to take the same tack to kind of like tell you now, but Walz's mentality, from what I've seen, he's very much he's very much a kind of football guy, Midwestern football guy, which is all about get in the middle of their chili, to use that phrase. I don't know how many people have heard that phrase. If you played played football in the Midwest, 2 days and shit like that, get in the middle of his chili is what my coach used to say to me. And so get low, and right there, get his numbers. He's a kind of getting his numbers kind of guy. So he may take it on the offense, and just kind of like thinking about it in football terms, just straight go for the sack. Instead of trying to
go after his,
instead of like luring him out. So, he might. I mean, I
wonder what I wish we'd created like a pool, like odds.
I couldn't find a bingo card. I couldn't find a bingo card for this debate. I couldn't. I wanted
with
to.
This one, it could go anywhere. I mean,
that's true.
It really could. Yeah.
Especially if Vance doesn't have anything to attack Walz on personally, doesn't have anything to attack him on, and proceeds to attack Kamala as though she's there, and Walz constantly to be like, "You're debating me, dude." He's like, "I'm here. You're not debating her. You're debating me."
And that could happen. They could end up trying to make his presence more about, because in a way you can do that to kind of diminish the importance of the VP pick if you make your talking points about the first person on the ticket, or even Joe Biden. You can kind of disregard them both. You got to be careful about doing that though, because it can kind of make you look unfocused. But I wouldn't be surprised if he does it at least a few times. I think the questioners will probably ask about the Springfield thing, so it'll be interesting to see how Vance deals.
How he responds, when that came out. Dan Shire says, Walz has a higher bar. People expect him to do well, if not win. Vance pretty much just has to keep his cool. Expectations are so low, it's easy to be the perceived winner. Bush 2.0.
Yeah, and the way the media has been kind of sane washing the Trump and Walz, or the Trump and Vance campaign. Vance basically just has to not look insane.
Right.
But he managed to do that while ordering donuts So who knows?
That was so cringe. It's
Some of these
like I'm telling
sprinkled
you,
ones.
raccoons in a human suit. They don't know that they don't know how to express themselves like humans do. They just know humans like to eat. Humans like to eat sweet things. We like to eat sweet things. I will take sweet things. It's like, how are you, fellow human? It's like
when Morty realized that the squirrels were intelligent and were capable of taking over the planet, that was less awkward than whatever JD Vance was doing in that donut store.
I need backup. I got a 210 on a possible Doolittle. It's one of my favorites. You fuck with squirrels, Morty.
It's over.
You're gonna find a new reality. Rosina for $1.99. Thank you so much for the super chat. Says Vance has to avoid talking about women and pets. I would put
and
money.
sofas.
Yeah, and sofas, yeah, and furniture. IKEA. Avoid the whole IKEA, thing. But I anticipate it coming up. I really do. I probably put a little bit of money down that it will come up. That somehow it's going to get broached. Like I said, this could go anywhere. It is as much a chance of it being a complete and total shit show as it is one of them completely dominating the other one. I cannot predict who. I've not seen enough from Walz as far as debate performances or being out there like that to say this is how it's gonna go. And Vance is so unpredictable, given various things that he deals with. I honestly don't know. I honestly have no idea.
Was Vance in forensics, high school or college?
I don't know. That's a solid question.
Walz has been coached. Vance has been couched. Yeah, they just make sure he gets enough time with the love seat of his choice, so he doesn't have any. His nerves are settled. Well, there's a snuggling couch. That's a couch you take home to mama.
Oh, she's a 3 cushion.
Chicka-chong.
That needs to be like a fucking SNL sketch where if someone like puts a couch like over there on the side off camera where you can't see it, and JD Vance is kind of like, what was the question? Just distraction.
That's like the scene in Kingpin where they can't figure out how to distract the one farmer with the with Vanessa Angel's character, and she's like, I don't understand why this is doing this. And Randy Quaid's like whispering, and they put the goat there.
He brings in the goat.
Like, he's just distracted.
Lieutenant Jedi, good to see you. Says, I am not looking for change under those cushions. No, we are not. Well, not like you could get them out there anyway. I mean, they're all adhered to the bottom, so.
Yeah.
I Killed It All says, Vance is such a prude, he probably gets turned on at the sight of an upturned dust ruffle.
Upturned dust ruffle is his username on some of his favorite sites.
Oh, man. So, just to give everybody a heads up, when we do go live, hey, Raven Darkstar, good to see you. AR, good to see you as well. This thing goes live at 8 o'clock. I've already got the stream pulled up. They're doing commentary right now, which we don't need to see. And, but here in about 8 minutes, we're supposed to go. So I'm going to go ahead and share it over and make sure that we're ready to go so I don't miss it. And that's an enter. And we'll go ahead and pull that down for the moment. But we are almost ready to go here in about 8 minutes. So just a heads up, everybody in the live chat. Oh, and wrote in the last name, Gabba Gabba to you, sir. Zerzuz, good to see you. Any super chats or any of the thanks or the milestone chats that come through while we're listening to the debate. I don't want to, until we get like a natural break, I don't want to interrupt the momentum that we have going on. And we're going to do the same thing we did with the Harris Trump debate, where we kind of provide commentary, but try not to interrupt them so we can hear everything they're saying, unless something really calls for it. But I'll try not to interrupt anything. So we'll keep that momentum going. When we get a natural break, when the station breaks, I can go ahead and read out any super chats or thanks or milestones that come through. So the StreamYard stars them for me, so I don't have to worry about missing them. So I appreciate everybody being here. Got a bunch of people in the chat. This is going to be amazing. I also know that Eric over at Planet Peterson is streaming this over in his Discord. So there's a number of places where you can watch this, which is really, really cool. So we got this going on. I'm going to be pulling this directly from, I believe, CBS is who's going to be checking this, because CBS is typically pretty cool, about watching. I know it's being simulcast freaking everywhere, so there shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah.
Oh, let's see. We got about 7 minutes. I try to miss anybody here. Rational Anti-Theist, good to see you. And and I wanted to give a thank you. I wanted to give a big thank you to everybody for for coming out to.
Oh, you muted yourself. You're muted, JL.
I'm teching like Irish Demon. Sorry. So I want to thank everybody for coming out to my premiere. For my premiere yesterday. I know it's been about almost 2 months since I had some content out. Like I said, now that the schedule is much more freed up, I'll be able to do content more regularly. So I want to thank everybody coming out. All the comments have been great. And the guy I covered, Darwin to Jesus, is apparently all up in arms about that. Apparently he got big mad because he wants me to come over to Twitter. You come over to a Twitter space and I'll break it down for you, son. I'm like, I'm not going over to the CP platform just so I can, just so you can mute me or kick me out of your freaking space, when I trounce your ass. So
is he the one that did? Is he the one that was advocating no one should talk to atheists?
Yeah. He was like,
okay.
No evidence. Do not provide evidence to atheists. I'm like, it kind of defeats the purpose, but nonetheless, and I schooled him on every one of his points. His response to my video was essentially, nuh-uh. He's like, nah, you didn't address any of my points. He's like, I actually did every single one. In fact, I get comments that I don't let you talk enough. Like I'll do 5 to 10 seconds, and then you make a statement, and then I'll reply to that. So just so people can keep the context. But I do that so that they can't copyright strike my shit. You do 10 seconds of a video in response to it. If I spend more time talking than they do, they can't come back and hit me. I learned that.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, thank you to everybody coming out. I hope you all enjoyed that video. I appreciate all of the comments on it as well. So it's been a lot of fun. We got about 5 minutes till. Let me see here. Yahooligans says, I can't wait for this debate. Who thinks Walz is going to do a sofa zinger on JD?
I think I could come up.
I could roll those dice. I'll roll those dice.
Yeah. I'm not willing to bet money on anything that happens in this debate, but if it was the second one, maybe. Yeah.
Anonymous By says, well, it's not like he could bring evidence. Exactly. He can't. His position is literally a logical fallacy. That's what it is. It's predicated upon that. And then at the very end, he decided to go precept. And I was like, they have no grounds for their worldview. They can't ground morality. They can't ground logic. They can't do that.
That's always
They don't have knowledge. And I'm like, So apparently I sound hollow. Is that better?
You did sound a little echoey. I don't know if it's going through your... It almost sounds like it's not going through your mic and going through your webcam.
Let me check my settings. Oh, yeah. No. That's my camera. Audio. Microphone. Oh, you motherfucker.
StreamYard.
How's that sound?
Oh, that's better.
StreamYard reverted to my secondary microphone when this one I accidentally unplugged it because I hit my wire.
Yeah.
Oh, and then it reverted to my secondary, which is why it sounded so hollow.
Yeah, that's much cleaner.
There we go. Sorry about that. My bad. But thank you for letting me know. Appreciate that. See? Greatest live chat on the planet. They'll always let you know. Hey, you suck. You need to do better. And I'm like, you got it. I will do better for you.
They do that to me quite frequently. Spatchcock, are you drunk? We can't hear you. What are you struggling with software again? Yes.
Javer says,
this is not a smart animal. It's not a smart animal. No.
Javer says, XLR doesn't come unplugged. That's true. They don't. Tony Regime says, if their God had his way, we wouldn't have knowledge. Good point. Well, technically, if their God exists, there really is no knowledge, because if their God exists and it's logically entailed that the entire system and all the parameters of the system, everything that literally is how we determine things to be true, is completely subjective and arbitrary. All it has to be is logically possible. But as long as it's logically possible in the parameters of the entire system, then that technically means that anything that the God wants to be true can ostensibly be true. So therefore, there technically is no knowledge other than what is ascertained by that entity within the realm of logical possibility. But that means that you can never make a statement as being absolutely true, because it's subjectively true as to the God. So that's just,
and it's always contingent.
So.
And you would always have to put a pin in it, because it would always be like, well, eventually we'll know when we get him to weigh in on it. So.
Right. Here we go. Let me.
Where did Vance go?
Did he just
walk?
wander?
He just walked right past his little dais.
Ed, give us your last thoughts as we watch here as JD Vance is off in the wings for the moment. Oh, there
it's performance.
He was looking for the donuts.
Seems obvious, but no faux pause, and they're looking for a viral moment.
Let me know if y'all can hear it well enough.
It is pretty quiet.
Yeah, it is.
One
second.
Governor Walz appears to be taking some.
Here
notes.
we go.
JD Vance doing the same as our colleagues.
And maybe you're shaking hands.
Get out of here.
Or we, the cameras.
He shook his hand and just wandered off.
Well,
to
we
the
have
side.
the vice presidential debate coming up in a moment. It will be moderated by our own Nora O'Donnell and Margaret Brennan. Ohio Senator J.D. Vance and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz take the stage.
Two women
are
the
stage.
So
stick with us here
woke.
and join us also on our streaming channels, CBS News 24/7.
Make sure they're buttoned up to the neck.
Content
You don't want to give Vance any ideas.
Anywhere else. Thank you for joining us.
One of them has really thick shoulder pads, like the arm cushions on a settee, or a sexy.
You over there looking like an overstuffed couch. You don't want to give that man any thoughts.
You look like a daybed, sexy daybed. JD Vance wants to get it on. I don't know why my JD Vance is a like a foghorn leghorn.
Tonight, with just over a month to go until Election Day, the first and only meeting between the two men who hope to become vice president of the United States. Democratic Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota and Republican Senator
we can't get Vance out of the green room.
Now, this is likely the
final
debate of this election cycle, and voting is already underway in 20 states. CBS News polling shows this remains a race either presidential candidate could win. The CBS News vice presidential debate
Rivera.
starts
Is
now.
this debate going to be JD Vance's guide to a casting couch?
Take this country back. And we are ready to continue to build the
JD
future
Vance running the
together.
casting couch. It's just
We're
the
going to turn
couch.
this whole country red with President Donald J. Trump's leadership.
You know what's at the end of this little journey? Kamala Harris as the next president of the United States.
This is a CBS News special, live from CBS News headquarters in New York. America Decides, the vice presidential debate.
Live from New York, it's Tuesday night.
Good evening, I'm Nora O'Donnell, and thank you for joining us for tonight's CBS News vice presidential debate. We want to welcome our viewers on CBS, on other networks here in the U.S. and around the world. We have a
and all of you
consequential night
disgusting
ahead, and our
YouTubers
focus is
who are
the
live
issues
streaming
that
this
matter
now.
to you, the voter. Let's introduce the candidates. Minnesota's Democratic Governor Tim Walz.
I've got the
and
debate
Ohio's
volume turned
Republican
all the way
Senator
up, Max.
J.D. Vance tonight meeting for the first time.
Camera cut.
Margaret
There you
Brennan.
go.
In order to have a thoughtful and civil debate, these are the rules that both campaigns have agreed to. Questions will be directed at one candidate who will have 2 minutes to respond. The other candidate will be allowed 2 minutes for rebuttal. Then each candidate will get another minute to make further points, with an additional 1 minute each at the discretion of the moderator. The primary role of the moderators is to facilitate the debate between the candidates, enforce the rules, and provide the candidates with the opportunity to fact-check claims made by each other.
CBS News reserves the right to mute the candidates' microphones to maintain decorum. We have not shared the questions or topics with the campaigns.
Damn,
The
CBS
stage
ain't playing.
is set. Governor,
Mute 'em and
Senator,
boot 'em.
thank you for joining us. Let's get started. Tonight, our country is facing several unfolding crises. The Middle East is on the brink of war. Americans are suffering from the catastrophic impact of Hurricane Helene. And now a labor strike as 25,000 dock workers from Maine to Texas are picketing. We're going to begin tonight with the Middle East. Margaret.
Thank you, Nora. Earlier today, Iran launched its largest attack yet on Israel, but that attack failed thanks to joint U.S. and Israeli defensive action. President Biden has deployed more than 40,000 U.S. military personnel and assets to that region over the past year to try to prevent a regional war. Iran is weakened, but the U.S. still considers it the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, and it has drastically reduced the time it would take to develop a nuclear weapon. It is down now to 1 or 2 weeks' time. Governor Walz, if you were the final voice in the Situation Room, would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you. And thank you for those joining at home tonight. Let's keep in mind where this started. October 7th, Hamas terrorists massacred over 1,400 Israelis and took prisoners. Israel's ability to be able to defend itself is absolutely fundamental. Getting its hostages back, fundamental, and ending the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. But the expansion of Israel and its proxies is an absolute fundamental necessity for the United States to have the steady leadership there. You saw it experienced today, where along with our Israeli partners and our coalition, able to stop the incoming attack. But what's fundamental here is that steady leadership is going to matter. It's clear, and the world saw it on that debate stage a few weeks ago. A nearly 80-year-old Donald Trump talking about crowd sizes is not what we need in this moment. But it's not just that. It's those that were closest to Donald Trump that understand how dangerous he is when the world is this dangerous. His chief of staff, John Kelly, said that he was the most flawed human being he'd ever met. And both of his secretaries of defense and his national security advisors said he should be nowhere near the White House. Now, the person closest to them, Donald Trump, said he's unfit for the highest office. That was Senator Vance. What we've seen out of Vice President Harris is we've seen steady leadership. We've seen a calmness that is able to draw on the coalitions to bring them together, understanding that our allies matter. When our allies see Donald Trump turn towards Vladimir Putin, turn towards North Korea, when we start to see that type of fickleness around holding the coalitions together, we will stay committed. And as the vice president said today we will protect our forces and our allied forces, and there will be consequences.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, the same question. Would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
So, Margaret, I want to answer the question. First of all, thanks, Governor. Thanks to CBS for hosting the debate. And thanks, most importantly, to the American people who are watching this evening and caring enough about this country to pay attention to this vice presidential debate. I want to answer the question, but I want to actually give an introduction to myself a little bit, because I recognize a lot of Americans don't know who either one of us are. I was raised in a working class family. My mother required food assistance for periods of her life. My grandmother required Social Security help to raise me. And she raised me in part because my own mother struggled with addiction for a big chunk of my early life. I went to college on the GI Bill after I enlisted in the Marine Corps and served in Iraq. And so I stand here asking to be your vice president with extraordinary gratitude for this country, for the American dream that made it possible for me to live my dreams. And most importantly, I know that a lot of you are worried about the chaos in the world and the feeling that the American dream is unattainable. I want to try to convince you tonight over the next 90 minutes that if we get better leadership in the White House, if we get Donald Trump back in the White House, the American dream is going to be attainable once again. Now, to answer this particular question, we have to remember that as much as Governor Walz just accused Donald Trump of being an agent of chaos, Donald Trump actually delivered stability in the world, and he did it by establishing effective deterrence. People were afraid of stepping out of line. Iran, which launched this attack, has received over $100 billion in unfrozen assets thanks to the Kamala Harris administration. What do they use that money for? They use it to buy weapons that they're now launching against our allies, and God forbid, potentially launching against the United States as well. Donald Trump recognized that for people to fear the United States, you needed peace through strength. They needed to recognize that if they got out of line, the United States global leadership would put stability and peace back in the world. Now, you asked about a preemptive strike, Margaret, and I want to answer the question. Look, it is up to Israel what they think they need to do to keep their country safe, and we should support our allies wherever they are when they're fighting the bad guys. I think that's the right approach to take with the Israel question.
Thank you, Senator.
Israel's
Governor
making a
Walz,
commitment
do you
for
care
us
to
if they do a
respond to any
preemptive
of the
strike on
allegations?
Iran.
Well, look, Donald
Neither
Trump
one of
was
them
in
directly
office. We'll
answered the
sometimes
question.
hear a revisionist history, but when Donald Trump was in office, it was Donald Trump who we had a coalition of nations that had boxed Iran's nuclear program in, the inability to advance it. Donald Trump pulled that program and put nothing else in its place. So Iran is closer to a nuclear weapon than they were before because of Donald Trump's fickle leadership. And when Iran shot down an American aircraft in international airspace, Donald Trump tweeted, because that's the standard diplomacy of Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And when Iranian missiles did fall near U.S. troops and they received traumatic brain injuries, Donald Trump wrote it off as headaches. Look, our allies understand that Donald Trump is fickle. He will go to whoever has the most flattery or where it makes sense to him. Steady leadership like you witnessed today, like you witnessed in April. Both Iranian attacks were repelled. Our coalition is strong, and we need the steady leadership that Kamala Harris is providing.
Senator Vance, the U.S. did have a diplomatic deal with Iran to temporarily pause parts of its nuclear program, and President Trump did exit that deal. He recently said, just 5 days ago, the U.S. must now make a diplomatic deal with Iran because the consequences are impossible. Did he make a mistake? You have 1 minute.
Well, first of all, Margaret, diplomacy is not a dirty word, but I think that's something that Governor Walz just said is quite extraordinary. You yourself just said Iran is as close to a nuclear weapon today as they have ever been. And Governor Walz, you blame Donald Trump. Who has been the vice president for the last 3.5 years? And the answer is your running mate, not mine. Donald Trump consistently made the world more secure. Now we talk about
if you shred an international treaty, you don't get to put it back together again.
Where we are right now,
right.
You can't ignore October the 7th, which I appreciate Governor Walz bringing up. But when did Iran and Hamas and their proxies attack Israel? It was during the administration of Kamala Harris. So Governor Walz can criticize Donald
jumping
Trump's
on the opportunities
tweets,
that Trump set up.
Smart diplomacy and peace through strength is how you bring stability back to a very broken world. Donald Trump has already done it once before. Ask yourself at home, when was the last time, I'm 40 years old, when was the last time that an American president didn't have a major conflict break out? The only answer is during the 4 years that Donald Trump was president.
Gentlemen, we have a lot to get to. Nora?
Margaret, thank you. Let's turn now to Hurricane Helene. The storm could become one of the deadliest on record. More than 160 people are dead and hundreds more are missing. Scientists say climate change makes these hurricanes larger, stronger, and more deadly because of the historic rainfall. Senator Vance, according to CBS News polling, 7 in 10 Americans and more than 60% of Republicans under the age of 45 favor the U.S. taking steps to try and reduce climate change. Senator, what responsibility would the Trump administration have to try and reduce the impact of climate change? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Sure. So first of all, let's start with the hurricane because it's an unbelievable, unspeakable human tragedy. I just saw today actually a photograph of 2 grandparents on a roof with a 6-year-old child, and it was the last photograph ever taken of them because the roof collapsed and those innocent people lost their lives. And I'm sure Governor Walz joins me in saying our hearts go out to those innocent people, our prayers go out to them, and we want as robust and aggressive as a federal response as we can get to save as many lives as possible, and then of course afterwards to help the people in those communities rebuild. I mean, these are communities that I love. Some of them I know very personally in Appalachia, all across the Southeast. They need their government to do their job. And I commit that when Donald Trump is president again, the government will put the citizens of this country first when they suffer from a disaster. And Nora, you asked about climate change. I think this is a very important issue. Look, a lot of people are justifiably worried about all these crazy weather patterns. I think it's important for us, first of all, to say,
I mean, the ones we've been warning about.
We want the environment to be cleaner and safer. But one of the things that I've noticed some of our Democratic friends talking a lot about is a concern about carbon emissions, this idea that carbon emissions drives all of the climate change. Well, let's just say that's true, just for the sake of argument, so we're not arguing about weird science. Let's just say that's true. Well, if you believe that, what would you want to do? The answer is that you'd want to reshore as much American manufacturing as possible, and you'd want to produce as much energy as possible in the United States of America because we're the cleanest economy in the entire world. What have Kamala Harris's policies actually led to? More energy production in China, more manufacturing overseas, more doing business in some of the dirtiest parts of the entire world. And when I say that, I mean the amount of carbon emissions they're doing per unit of economic output. So if we actually care about getting cleaner air and cleaner water, the best thing to do is to double down and invest in American workers and the American people. And unfortunately, Kamala Harris has done exactly the opposite.
Which is what the Inflation
Governor
Reduction
Walz, you have
Act
2 minutes
did.
to respond.
Well, we got close to an agreement because all those things are happening. Look, first of all, it is a horrific tragedy with this hurricane. And my heart goes out to the folks that are down there in contact with the governors. I serve as co-chair of the Council of Governors as we work together on these emergency managements. Governors know no partisanship. They work together. So all of the governors and the emergency responders are on the ground. Those happen on the front end. The federal government comes in, makes sure they're there that we recover, but we're still in that phase where we need to make sure that they're staying there, staying focused. Now, look, coming back to the climate change issue, there's no doubt this thing roared onto the scene faster and stronger than anything we've seen. Senator Vance has said that there's a climate problem in the past. Donald Trump called it a hoax and then joked that these things would make more beachfront property to be able to invest in. What we've seen out of the Harris administration now, the Biden-Harris administration, is we've seen this investment. We've seen massive investments, the biggest in global history that we've seen in the Inflation Reduction Act, has created jobs all across the country. 2,000 in Jeffersonville, Ohio, taking the EV technology that we invented and making it here. 200,000 jobs across the country. The largest solar manufacturing plant in North America sits in Minnesota. But my farmers know climate change is real. They've seen 500-year droughts, 500-year floods back to back. But what they're doing is adapting, and this has allowed them to tell me, look, I harvest corn, I harvest soybean, and I harvest wind. We are producing more natural gas and more oil at any time than we ever have. We're also producing more clean energy. So the solution for us is to continue to move forward, that climate change is real. Reducing our impact is absolutely critical, but this is not a false choice. You can do that at the same time you're creating the jobs that we're seeing all across the country. That's exactly what this administration has done. We are seeing us becoming an energy superpower for the future, not just the current. And that's what absolutely makes sense. And then we start thinking about how do we mitigate these disasters.
Thank you. Senator,
Walz
I want to
prepped
give you
on
an
climate
opportunity
change.
to respond there. The
He
governor
prepped on
mentioned
climate
that
change.
President Trump has called climate change a hoax. Do you agree?
Well, look, what the president has
He
said
has.
is that if the Democrats, in particular Kamala Harris and her leadership, if they really believe that climate change is serious, what they would be doing is more manufacturing and more energy production in the United States of America, and that's not what they're doing. So clearly, Kamala Harris herself
That's not what the
doesn't
Inflation
believe her own
Reduction
rhetoric
Act
on
had.
this. If she did, she would actually agree with Donald Trump's energy policies. Now, something Governor Walz said I think is important to touch upon, because when we talk about clean energy, I think that's a slogan that often the Democrats will use here. I'm talking, of course, about the Democratic leadership. And the real issue is that if you're spending hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars of American taxpayer money on solar panels that are made in China, number one, you're going to make the economy dirtier. We should be making more of those solar panels here in the United States of America. Some of them are, Tim, but a lot of them are being made overseas in China, especially the components that go into those solar panels. So if you really want to make the environment cleaner, you've got to invest in more energy production. We haven't built a nuclear facility, I think, one in the past 40 years.
Senator.
Natural gas, we got to invest more in it. Kamala Harris has done the opposite.
We've dumped a
That's raised
shitload of
energy
money in
prices and
natural
also
gas.
meant that we're doing
Senator,
worse by
your
the
time
climate.
is up. Governor, would you like to respond?
Well, look, we're producing more natural gas than we ever have. There's no moratorium on that. We're producing more oil, but the folks know, and like I said, again, these are not liberal folks. These are not folks that are Green New Deal folks. These are farmers that have been drought one year, massive flooding the next year. They understand that it makes sense. Look, our number one export cannot be topsoil from erosion from these massive storms. We saw it in Minnesota this summer. And thinking about how do we respond to that, we're thinking ahead on this. And what Kamala Harris has been able to do in Minnesota, we're starting to weatherproof some of these things. The infrastructure law that was passed allows us to think about mitigation in the future. How do we make sure that we're protecting by burying our power lines? How do we make sure that we're protecting lakefronts and things that we're seeing more and more of? But to call it a hoax and to take the oil company executives to Mar-a-Lago, say, give me money for my campaign and I'll let you do whatever you want. We can be smarter about that. And an all above energy policy is exactly what she's doing, creating those jobs right here.
Governor, your time is up. The overwhelming consensus among scientists is that the Earth's climate is warming at an unprecedented rate. Margaret?
Thank you, Nora. We're going to turn now to immigration. The crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border consistently
Vance, you're just wrong,
ranks as one
and
of
your
the
running
top
mate is an
issues
idiot.
for American voters. Senator Vance, your
Immigration.
campaign is pledging to carry out the largest mass deportation plan in American history and to use the U.S.
Sexy.
military to do so. Could you be more specific about exactly how this will work? For example, would you deport parents who have entered the U.S. illegally and separate them from any of their children who were born on U.S. soil? You have 2 minutes.
So first of all, Margaret, before we talk about deportations, we have to stop the bleeding. We have a historic immigration crisis because Kamala Harris started and said that she wanted to undo all of Donald Trump's border policies. 94 executive orders.
They were creating
suspending
humanitarian
deportations,
crises.
decriminalizing illegal aliens, massively increasing the asylum fraud that exists in our system. That has opened the floodgates. And what it's meant is that a lot of fentanyl is coming into our country. I had a mother who struggled with opioid addiction and has gotten clean. I don't want people who are struggling with addiction to be deprived of their second chance because Kamala Harris let in fentanyl into our communities at record levels. So you've got to stop the bleeding. You've got to re-implement Donald Trump's border policies, build the wall, re-implement deportations. And that gets me to your point, Margaret, about what do we actually do?
Over 90% of the fentanyl comes in is smuggled in by American citizens. A wall's not going to change that.
I think the first thing that we do is we start with the criminal migrants. About 1 million of those people have committed some form of crime in addition to crossing the border illegally. I think you start with deportations on those folks. And then I think you make it harder for illegal aliens to undercut the wages of American workers. A lot of people will go home if they can't work for less than minimum wage in our own country. And by the way, that'll be really good for our workers who just want to earn a fair wage for doing a good day's work.
You have to hold the employers accountable for that.
You ask about family separation. Right now in this country, Margaret, we have 320,000 children that the Department of Homeland Security has effectively lost. Some of them have been sex trafficked. Some of them, hopefully, are
guys lost
with their families. Some of them have been
under,
used
that was
as
under
drug
Trump's
trafficking
administration,
mules.
was it
the
not?
real family separation policy in this country is unfortunately Kamala Harris's wide open southern border. And I'd ask my fellow Americans to remember when she came into office, she said she was going to do this. Real leadership would be saying, you know what, I screwed up. We're going to go back to Donald Trump's border policies. I wish that she would do that. It would be good for all of us.
A humanitarian crisis.
Governor, do you care to respond to any of those specific allegations, including that the vice president is, quote, letting in fentanyl and using kids as drug mules, among other things regarding children?
The drug mule is not true, but I will say about this, about the fentanyl, because this is a crisis of this, the opioid crisis. And the good news on this is the last 12 months saw the largest decrease in opioid deaths in our nation's history, 30% decrease in Ohio, but there's still more work to do. But let's go back to this on immigration. Kamala Harris was the attorney general of the largest state, a border state in California. She's the only person in this race who prosecuted transnational gangs for human trafficking and drug interventions. But look, we all want to solve this. Most of us want to solve this, and that is the United States Congress. That's the Border Patrol agents. That's the Chamber of Commerce. That's most Americans out here. That's why we had the fairest and the toughest bill on immigration that this nation's seen. It was crafted by a conservative senator from Oklahoma,
as well.
James Lankford. I know him. He's super conservative, but he's a man of principle, wants to get it done. Democrats and Republicans worked on this piece of legislation. The Border Patrol said, this is what we need in here. These are the experts. And the Chamber of Commerce and the Wall Street Journal said, pass this thing. Kamala Harris helped get there. 1,500 new border agents, detection for drugs, DOJ money to speed up these the adjudications on this, just what America wants. But as soon as I was getting ready to pass and actually tackle this, Donald Trump said no, told them to vote against it because it gives him a campaign issue. It gives him what would Donald Trump talk about if we actually did some of these things? And they need to be done by the legislature. You can't just do this through the executive branch. So look, we have the options to do this. Donald Trump had 4 years. He had 4 years to do this. And he promised you, America, how easy it would be. I'll build you a big, beautiful wall, and Mexico will pay for it. Less than 2% of that wall got built, and Mexico didn't pay a dime. But here we are again,
president of Mexico
9
laughed
years
at
after
him.
he came down that escalator.
Good luck getting that.
Dehumanizing people and
You
telling
can
them what he was
bill me,
going to do.
motherfucker.
As far as the deportation plan, at one point, Senator Vance said it was so unworkable to be laughable. So that's where we're at. Pass the bill, she'll sign it.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, the question was, will you separate parents from their children even if their kids are U.S. citizens. You have 1 minute.
Margaret, my point is that we already have massive child separations thanks to Kamala Harris's open border. And I didn't accuse Kamala Harris of inviting drug mules. I said that she enabled the Mexican drug cartels to operate freely in this country. And we know that they use children as drug mules. And it is a disgrace. And it has to stop.
The statistics don't bear that out.
What Tim said just doesn't pass the smell test. For 3 years, Kamala Harris went out bragging that she was going to undo Donald Trump's border policy. She did exactly that. We had a record number of illegal crossings. We had a record number of fentanyl coming into our country. And now that she's running for president, or a few months before, she says that somehow she got religion and cared a lot about a piece of legislation. The only thing that she did when she became the vice president, when she became the
there's a lot of bullshit
was
in
to
this.
undo 94 Donald Trump executive actions that
because
opened the
they
border.
were trash.
This problem is leading to massive problems in the United States of America.
It's not. The
Parents
statistics
who can't
do
afford
not bear
healthcare,
any of this
schools
out.
that are overwhelmed.
No.
It's got to stop, and it will when Donald Trump is president
Senator,
again.
your time is up. Governor,
He didn't demonstrate that when he was president
our
the first
CBS
time.
News polling, which does show that a majority of Americans, more than 50%, support mass deportations.
Look, we fix this issue with a bill that is necessary, but the issue on this is what happens when you don't want to solve it. You demonize it. And we saw this. And Senator Vance, and it surprises me on this, talking about and saying, I will create stories to bring attention to this. That vilified a large number of people who were here legally in the community of Springfield. The Republican governor said, it's not true.
That'd be a
Don't
check
do it.
if I had a bingo
There's
card.
consequences for this. There's consequences. We could come together. Senator Langford did it. We could come together and solve this if we didn't let Donald Trump continue to make it an issue. And the consequences in Springfield were the governor had to send state law enforcement to escort kindergartners to school. I believe Senator Vance wants to solve this, but by standing with Donald Trump and not working together to find a solution, it becomes a talking point. And when it becomes a talking point like this, we dehumanize and villainize other human beings.
Tim,
Governor, your time is up. Senator, I'll give you 1 minute, but let me just ask you the question first. The governor has made the point, and I think as a sitting lawmaker, you know that Congress controls the purse strings and any funding. So you have said repeatedly that Donald Trump
needs to
would,
be
through executive
Needs
action,
to go through a bill. You can't just like,
this.
oh,
Do you disagree?
I sign it. Ha ha.
That Congress
yeah,
controls
executive
the purse
order.
strings
Executive
and would
orders
need
don't
support
have to be.
many
they
of
don't
the
get paid.
changes that you would actually
checks and
want
balances,
to implement. You have 1
idiot.
minute.
Look, Margaret, first of all, the gross majority of what we need to do at the southern border is just empowering law enforcement to do their job. I've been to the southern border
what
more
you
than
do
our
with
governor,
money?
Kamala Harris, has
That
been. And
requires
it's actually
Congress.
heartbreaking because the Border Patrol
Congress.
agents, they just want to be empowered to do their job. Of course,
Most
additional
of them
resources
are.
would help, but most of this is about the president and the vice president empowering our law enforcement to say, if you try to come across the border illegally, you've got to stay in Mexico. You've got to go back through proper channels. Now,
Nope.
Governor Walz brought up the community of Springfield, and he's very
Oh my
worried about the things that I've said in Springfield. Look, in Springfield, Ohio, and in communities all across this country, you've got schools that are overwhelmed. You've got hospitals that are overwhelmed. You have got housing that is totally unaffordable because we brought in millions of illegal immigrants to compete with Americans for scarce
That
homes.
has
The
nothing to
people
do with
that I'm most
immigration.
worried about in
Nothing to do
Springfield,
with-
Ohio, are the
Unaffordable
American
housing has
citizens
been an
who
issue.
had their lives
It was an
destroyed by
issue even
Kamala
when there
Harris's
was
open
zero.
border.
They
It is
were
a
letting
disgrace,
zero
Tim.
asylum
And I
seekers
actually
in
think,
during.
I agree with you.
COVID.
I think you want to solve this
Give
problem, but I
me
don't
a
think that Kamala Harris
fucking
does.
break.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, you have 1 minute to respond.
Yeah, well, it is law enforcement that asked for the bill. They helped craft it. They're the ones that supported
Right.
it. That's because they know we need to do this. Look, this issue of continuing to bring this up, of not dealing with it, of blaming migrants for everything. On housing, we could talk a little bit about
They
Wall
did
Street
that back in
speculators
2008.
buying up housing and making them less affordable, but it becomes a blame. Look, this bill also gives the money necessary to adjudicate. I agree. It should not take 7 years for an asylum claim to be done. This bill gets it done in 90 days. Then you start to make a difference in this and you start to adhere to what we know, American principles. I don't talk about my faith a lot, but Matthew 25:40 talks about, to the least amongst us, you do unto me. I think that's true of most Americans. They simply want order to it. This bill does it. It's funded. It's supported by the people who do it. And it lets us keep our dignity about how we treat other people.
Thank you, Governor. And just to clarify for our viewers,
was good.
Springfield, Ohio does have a large
Slapped him
number
with a
of
Bible.
Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected
Well,
status.
Margaret,
Nora?
but
Thank you.
Senator, we have so much to get to.
Margaret,
Thank you,
I think it's
Nora.
important
We're
because
gonna turn now to the
debate-
economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
the rules were that
The
you guys weren't
economy,
going to
we're-
fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP One app, where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole,
An illegal
and be
migrant.
granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. That is not a person
No.
coming in, applying
No,
for
that
a
is-
green card and waiting for 10 years. That
Thank
is
you,
the
Senator.
facilitation of illegal
That's an outright
immigration,
lie.
Margaret.
That is
Thank you,
a blatant-
Senator,
that
for
is not how that
describing
app
the
works.
legal
And
process.
Kamala
We have so much
Harris
to get
opened up
to,
that
Senator.
pathway.
Those
We have
laws
so
have been on
much-
the books since 1990.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The
We
CBP
wanna
One
have-
app has not been on the books since 1990.
You cut his fucking mic.
Gentlemen, the audience can't hear you
the
because your mics
asylum
were cut.
laws have
We
been.
have so much we want to get to. Thank you for explaining the legal process. Nora?
Thank you, Margaret. The economy is a top
love these
concern for
mods.
voters. Each of your campaigns has released an economic plan. So let's talk about the specifics. Governor Walz, Vice President Harris unveiled a plan that includes billions in tax credits for manufacturing, housing, and a renewed child tax credit. The Wharton School says your proposals will increase the nation's deficit by $1.2 trillion. How would you pay for that without ballooning the deficit? Governor, I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. And Kamala Harris and I do believe in the middle class because that's where we come from. We both grew up in that. We understand. So those of you out there listening tonight, you're hearing a lot of stuff back and forth, and it's good. It's healthy. That's what this is supposed to happen. You should be listening. How's this going to impact me? The bold forward plan that Kamala Harris put out there is talking about this housing issue. The one thing is there's 3 million new houses proposed under this plan with down payment assistance on the front end to get you in a house. A house is much more than just an asset to be traded somewhere. It's foundational to where you're at. And then making sure that the things you buy every day, whether they be
Not an
prescription
end-stage
drugs
capitalism,
or
it
other
is.
things, that there's fairness in that.
No.
Look, the $35 insulin is a good thing,
Oh, fungible,
but it
baby.
costs $5 to make insulin. They were charging $800 before
I'll be
this
right
law
Yeah, the
back.
went into
insulin,
effect.
the insulin
As
deal,
far
the
as the
medical deal
housing
was a
goes,
big win.
I've seen it in
Big
That was
Minnesota.
a big one.
12%
Yeah.
more houses in Minneapolis. Prices went down on rent 4%. It's working. And then making sure tax cuts go to the middle class. $6,000 child tax credit. We have one in Minnesota. Reduces childhood poverty by 1/3. We save money in the long run, and we do the right thing for families. And then getting businesses off the ground. The law as it stands right now is $5,000 tax credit for small business, increasing that to $50,000. Now, this is a philosophical difference between us. Donald Trump made a promise, and I'll give you this. He kept it. He took folks to Mar-a-Lago, said, you're rich as hell, I'm going to give you a tax cut. He gave the tax cuts that predominantly went to the top class. What happened there was an $8 trillion increase in the national debt, the largest
Right.
ever. Now he's proposing a 20% consumption or sales tax on everything we bring in. Everyone agrees, including businesses, it would be destabilizing it. It would increase inflation and potentially lead to a recession. Look, this is simple for you. Where are we going? Kamala Harris has said to do the things she wants to do. We'll just ask the wealthiest to pay their fair share. When you do that, our system works best. More people are participating in it, and folks have the things that they need.
Senator, I want to give you a moment to respond on that. But similarly, the Wharton School has done an analysis of the
I was
Trump
just thinking of
plan
them. I was
and
just
says
thinking of the
it
Wharton
would increase
School.
the nation's deficit by $5.8
Where'd they go?
trillion. My question is the same for you. How do you pay for all
5
that
trillion?
without ballooning
As opposed
the
to
deficit?
1.4?
I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, you're going to hear a lot from Tim Walz this evening, and you just heard it in the answer. A lot of what Kamala Harris proposes to do, and some of it, I'll be honest with you, it even sounds pretty good. Here's what you won't hear, is that Kamala Harris has already done it. Because she's been the vice president for 3.5 years. She had the opportunity to enact all of these great policies.
That's not how it
and what
works.
she's actually
That's not
done
how a VP
instead
works,
is
man.
drive the cost of food higher by 25%.
That's not
drive
what
the
caused
cost of
increases
housing
in
higher
groceries.
by about 60%. Open the American
Nor
southern
does-
border and make middle class life
Oh,
unaffordable.
I know he
for a
knows that
large
the
number of
executive
Americans.
branch
If Kamala
does not
Harris
normally
has such great
spearhead
plans for how to
legislation.
address middle
And
class
legislation
problems,
would be
then she
necessary
ought
to address
do them
this.
now. Not when asking for a promotion, but in the job the American people gave
She
her
wants a
3.5
promotion so she
years
can do
ago.
them.
And the fact that she isn't tells you a lot about how much you can trust her actual plans. Now, Donald Trump's economic plan is not just a plan, but it's also a record. A lot of those same economists attack Donald Trump's plans, and they have PhDs, but they don't have common sense and they don't have wisdom, because Donald Trump's economic policies delivered the highest take-home pay in a generation in this country, 1.5% inflation, and to boot,
it was artificial
all over the world.
It was an
so when
artificial
people say
inflation.
that Donald Trump's economic plan doesn't make sense, I say
that's why
look
we're
at
having the
record.
fallout that
He
we're having
delivered
now.
rising take-home pay for American workers.
That's why you can get $5 value meals again.
Admirably admits
They can
that
easily
they want to
collect
undo the Trump tax cuts. But if you look at what was so different about Donald Trump's tax cuts, even from previous Republican tax cut plans, is that a lot of those resources went to giving more take-home pay to middle-class and working-class Americans. It was passed in 2017, and you saw an American economic
bullshit.
boom.
No, it was an artificial boom.
This
You
country.
dumped money
That
into
is a
people's
record that I'm
pockets. They
proud to
dumped
run
it
on,
back
and
into
we're
the
going to
economy.
get back to that
But
common sense
the money's got
wisdom
to come
so
from
that
somewhere.
you can afford to live
Why do
the
you think we have
American
the
dream
problems
again.
we have
I know
now?
a lot of you are struggling. I know a lot of you are worried about paying the bills. It's going to stop when Donald Trump brings back common sense to this country.
Governor, do you want to respond to that?
A
What
lot
has
of them
Kamala
do
Harris
have
done for the middle
some
class?
amnesia
Kamala
about
Harris's
what
day
happened when
one
Trump
was
was president.
Donald Trump's failure on COVID that led to the collapse for our economy. We were already before COVID in a manufacturing recession, but 10 million people out of work, largest percentage since the Great Depression. 9 million jobs closed on that. That was day one. Whether it was the Infrastructure Act or other things we moved. Now, you made a question about experts, said this. I've made a note of this. Economists can't be trusted. Science can't be trusted. National security folks can't be trusted. Look, if you're going to be president, you don't have all the answers. Donald Trump believes he does. My pro tip of the day is this. If you need heart surgery, listen to the people at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, not Donald Trump. And the same thing goes with this. And I ask you out there, teachers, nurses, truck drivers, or whatever, how is it fair that you're paying your taxes every year and Donald Trump hasn't paid any federal tax in the last 15 years and the last year as president? That's what's wrong with the system. There's a way around it, and he's bragged about that. We're just asking for fairness in it, and that's all you want.
You have a minute.
Governor, you say trust the experts. But those same experts for 40 years said that if we shipped our manufacturing base off to China, we'd get cheaper goods. They lied about that. They said if we shipped our industrial base off to other countries, to Mexico and elsewhere, it would make the middle class stronger. They were wrong about that. They were wrong about the idea that if we made America less self-reliant,
that's because the right wing listened to ideologues that wanted to do labor arbitrage to
and for the
deflate
first time in a generation, Donald Trump had the wisdom
immediately.
and the courage to say to that bipartisan consensus, we're not doing it anymore.
This man
we're bringing American manufacturing back. We're unleashing American
if he actually
energy.
believes in
we're going to make more of our own
pulling.
stuff. And this isn't just an economic issue. I mean, I've got 3 beautiful little kids at home, 7, 4, and 2. And I love them very much. And I hope they're in bed right now. But look, so many of the drugs, the pharmaceuticals that we put in the bodies of our children are manufactured by nations that
get off daddy's special couch.
Has to stop. And we're not going to stop it by listening to experts. We're going to stop it by listening to common sense wisdom, which is what Donald Trump governed on.
Senator, your time is up. Governor Walz, can you address that?
No, he didn't. He wanted to put light bulbs in people.
More. Why?
If you're listening tonight,
you want to use sunlight to treat COVID.
Cuts,
can we get the light in?
Numbers were. Look, I'm a union guy on this. I'm not a guy who wanted to ship things overseas, but I understand that. Look, we produce soybeans and corn. We need to have fair trading partners. That's something that we believe in. I think the thing that most concerns me on this is Donald Trump was the guy who created the largest trade deficit in American history with China. So the rhetoric is good. Much of what the senator said right there, I'm in agreement with him on this. I watched it happen too. I watched it to my communities, and we talked about that. But we had people undercutting the right to collectively bargain. We had right to work states made it more difficult. We had companies that were willing to ship it over, and we saw people profit. They
saw the money opportunity and they didn't put it where it was supposed to go.
Into companies that
That's why it happened. That's why trickle-down economics doesn't work.
The issue is Donald Trump is talking about it. Kamala Harris has a record, 250,000 more manufacturing jobs just out of the IRA.
May I respond to that?
Yes.
So appreciate that. So if you notice what Governor Walz just did is he said, first of all, Donald Trump has to listen to the experts. And then when he acknowledged that the experts screwed up, he said, well, Donald Trump didn't do nearly as good of a job as the statistics
No, that's a
show
gross
that
generalization.
he did. So what Tim Walz is doing, and I honestly, Tim, I think you got a tough job here because you've got to play whack-a-mole. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver rising
he's
kids
the
on
one
pay,
having
which
to
of
do the
course he did.
whack-a-mole.
You've got to pretend that Donald Trump
I'm
didn't
here
deliver
campaigning with a
lower
guy who's
inflation,
an
which of
economic
course he
populist.
did. And then
He
you
did it, and he's
simultaneously
not.
got to defend Kamala Harris's atrocious economic record, which has made gas, groceries, and housing unaffordable for American citizens.
That's not why that
happened. By a
happened.
woman
No,
who would
that's not
sometimes
it.
go
And
into
also,
medical
his
debt
boy,
so that she
Trump,
could put
is not an
food on the
economic
table in our
populist. He's a
household.
culture war
I know
populist.
what it's like
His
to not
economic
be able to afford the
policies
things
are
that you need to
flat
afford.
out pro
We can do
corporate
so
governance.
much better. To all of you watching, we can get back to an America that's affordable again. We just got to get back to common sense economic principles.
I hope we have a conversation on healthcare then.
Senator, Governor.
Please.
Thank you, Margaret.
We have a lot to get to,
Yeah,
gentlemen, on many topics.
Let's talk
but
about
right
common
now, I
sense
want to
and
talk
healthcare
about
in this country.
personal qualifications. The vice president is often the last voice the president hears before making consequential decisions. We want to ask you about your
whack-a-mole is a new
leadership
sofa frame.
Governor
idea.
Walz, you said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy? You have 2 minutes.
Well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on, and I'm proud of that service. I joined the National Guard at 17, worked on family farms, and then I used the GI Bill to become a teacher, passionate about it, a young teacher. My first year out, I got the opportunity in the summer of '89 to travel to China. 35 years ago, be able to do that. I came back home and then started a program to take young people there. We would take basketball teams, we would take baseball teams, we would take dancers, and we would go back and forth to China. The issue for that was to try and learn. Now, look, my community knows who I am. They saw where I was at. Look, I will be the first to tell you, I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect. And I'm a knucklehead at times, but it's always been about that. Those same people elected me to Congress for 12 years. And in Congress, I was one of the most bipartisan people, working on things like farm bills that we got done, working on veterans benefits. And then the people of Minnesota were able to elect me to governor twice. So look, my commitment has been from the beginning to make sure that I'm there for the people, to make sure that I get this right. I will say more than anything, many times I will talk a lot. I will get caught up in the rhetoric. But being there, the impact it made, the difference it made in my life, I learned a lot about China. I hear the critiques of this. I would make the case that Donald Trump should have come on one of those trips with us. I guarantee you he wouldn't be praising Xi Jinping about COVID. And I guarantee you he wouldn't start a trade war that he ends up losing. So this is about trying to understand the world. It's about trying to do the best you can for your community. And then it's putting yourself out there and letting your folks understand what it is. My commitment, whether it be through teaching, which I was good at, or whether it was being a good soldier or was being a good member of Congress, those are the things that I think are the values that people care about.
Governor, just to follow up on that, the question
Did he
was,
lie
can you
about-
explain the discrepancy?
All I said on this was I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just, that's what I've said. So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Thank you, Governor. Senator Vance, in 2016, you called your running mate, Donald Trump, unfit for the nation's highest office, and you said he could be America's Hitler. I know you've been asked many times, and you've said you regret those comments and explained you then voted for Donald Trump in 2020. But the Washington Post reported new messages last week in which you also disparaged Trump's economic record while he was president, writing to someone in 2020, quote, Trump thoroughly failed to deliver his economic populism. You're now his running mate, and you've shifted many of your policy stances to align with his. If you become vice president, why should Americans trust that you will give Donald Trump the advice he needs to hear and not just the advice he wants to hear? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Margaret, because I've always been open. And sometimes, of course, I've disagreed with the president, but I've also been extremely open about the fact that I was wrong about Donald Trump.
I've always been
wrong,
frank
first
and
of all,
earnest with
because I
women. In
believed
Chicago,
some of the
I'm frank,
media
and in New
stories
York,
that
I'm
turned out
earnest.
to be dishonest fabrications of his record. But most importantly, Donald Trump delivered for the American people. Rising wages, rising take-home pay, an economy that worked for normal Americans, a secure southern border, a lot of things, frankly, that I didn't think he'd be able to deliver on. And yeah, when you screw up, when you misspeak, when you get something wrong and you change your mind, you ought to be honest with the American people about it. It's one of the reasons, Margaret, why I've done so many interviews is because I think it's important to actually explain to the American people where I come down on the issues and what changed. Now, you pointed out to messages from 2020. Margaret, I've been extremely consistent that I think there were a lot of things that we could have done better in the Trump administration the first round if Congress was doing its job. I strongly believe, and I've been a United States Senator, that Congress is not just a high-class debating society. It's not just a forum for senators and congressmen to whine about problems. It's a forum to govern.
Then
So
why
there
they
were a lot
turned
of
it
things
into
on
that?
the border, on tariffs, for example.
Let's
where
just
I think that
bring
we
up
could have
how
done
many
so much
votes
more if the
went
Republican
into
Congress
getting rid
and
of
the Democrats
Kevin
in
McCarthy,
Congress had been a little bit
and then
better
pretend that
about
the
how they govern
Republicans
the
were not
country.
in
They were
charge
so
of that.
obsessed with impeaching Donald Trump, they couldn't actually govern. And I want to talk about this tariff issue in particular,
Part of
Margaret,
part of
because,
impeaching a
you know,
president
Tim
is
just
part of
accused this
governing.
of being a national
I love it when
sales
these guys,
tax.
well, you're
Look,
not governing. That
one
is part of
thing,
governing.
and you're probably surprised to hear me praising Joe Biden, but the one thing that Joe Biden did is he continued some of the Trump tariffs that protected American manufacturing jobs. And it's the one issue, the most pro-worker
Except
part of
for the
Biden
EV ones that you
administration,
guys are
it's the one
demonizing him
issue where
about.
Kamala Harris has run away from Joe Biden's record. Think about this. If you're trying to employ slave laborers in China at $3 a day, you're going to do that and undercut the wages of American workers unless our country stands up for itself and says, you're not accessing our markets unless you're paying middle-class Americans a fair
That's
wage.
not how
Senator,
that works.
Your time is up.
You need
Nora?
a domestic
Now the issue of
alternative
reproductive
to the
rights.
international
Governor Walz,
supply.
after Roe versus Wade
Otherwise,
was
your
overturned,
citizens
you
just
signed a
pay
bill
more.
into law that made
Good
Minnesota one of the least
God.
restrictive states in the nation when it comes to abortion. Former President Trump said in the last debate that you believe abortion, quote, in the 9th month is absolutely fine. Yes or no? Is that what you support? I'll give you 2 minutes.
That's not what the bill says, but look,
Night, fangirl.
this issue
Thank you for
is
popping
what's
in.
on everyone's mind. Donald Trump put this all into motion. He brags about how great it was that he put the judges in and overturned Roe versus Wade, 52 years of personal autonomy. And then he tells us, oh, we send it to the states. It's a beautiful thing. Amanda Zaworski would disagree with you on it's a beautiful thing. A young bride in Texas waiting for their child at 18 weeks. She has a complication, a tear in the membrane. She needs to go in. The medical care at that point needs to be decided by the doctor. And that would have been an abortion. But in Texas, that would have put them in legal jeopardy. She went home, got sepsis, nearly dies, and now she may have difficulty having children. Or in Kentucky, Hadley Duvall, a 12-year-old child raped and impregnated by her stepfather. Those are horrific. Now, when God asked about that, Senator Vance said, 2 wrongs don't make a right. There is no right in this. So in Minnesota, what we did was restore Roe versus Wade. We made sure that we put women in charge of their health care. But look, this is not where, if you don't know Amanda or a Hadley, you soon will. Their Project 2025 is going to have a registry of pregnancies. It's going to make it more difficult, if not impossible, to get contraception and limit access, if not eliminate access to infertility treatments. For so many of you out there listening, me included, infertility treatments are why I have a child. That's nobody else's business, but those things are being proposed. And the catch-all on this is, well, the states will decide what's right for Texas might not be right for Washington. That's not how this works. This is basic human right. We have seen maternal mortality skyrocket in Texas, outpacing many other countries in the world.
It's insane.
This is about healthcare. In Minnesota, we are ranked first in healthcare for a reason. We trust women. We trust doctors.
Senator, do you want to respond to the governor's claim? Will you create a federal pregnancy monitoring agency?
No, Nora, certainly we won't. And I want to talk about this issue because I know a lot of Americans care about it, and I know a lot of Americans don't agree with everything.
Like
that
you
I've
would
ever
have
said
a
on this
say in that
topic.
if
And,
Trump did it.
You know, I grew up in a working class family in a neighborhood where I knew a lot of young women who had unplanned pregnancies and decided to terminate those pregnancies because they feel like they didn't have any other options. And, you know, I one of them is actually very dear to me. And I know she's watching tonight, and I love you. And she told me something a couple years ago that she felt like if she hadn't had that abortion, that it would have destroyed her life because she was in an abusive relationship. And I think that what I take from that as a Republican who proudly wants to protect innocent life in this country, who proudly wants to protect the vulnerable, is that my party, we've got to do so much better of a job at earning the American people's trust back on this issue where they frankly just don't trust us. And I think that's one of the things that Donald Trump and I are
Because of
endeavoring
what
to
you
do.
did.
I want us as a Republican
It's predicated
party
on
to
the
be
idea of
pro-family
treating
in the
women's
fullest
bodies as
sense of the
collective
word. I want
property
us to
for
support
breeding
fertility
stock.
treatments. I
You
want us to
can't
make
get
it
around
easier
that.
for moms to afford to have babies. I want it to make it easier for young families to afford a home so they can afford a place to
That's
raise that family.
irrelevant.
And I think there's so much that we can
It's
do
if you
on the
remove
public
their
policy
elect-
front
if you
just to get
remove their
women more
agency,
options.
it doesn't matter how cheap
Donald
you
Trump's
make
been
it.
very clear that on the abortion policy,
At the very least, you should
that we
subsidize
have a
goddamn
big country and it's
everything if you
diverse.
turn them into
California
breeding
has
stock.
a different viewpoint on
That's
this
what's
than Georgia.
entailed
Georgia
there.
has a different
And
viewpoint
it's still
from Arizona.
monstrous.
And the proper way to handle this, as messy as democracy sometimes is to let voters make these decisions, let the individual states make their abortion policy. And I think that's what makes the most sense in a very
There is a
big,
principled
very diverse, and let's
standard
be
that
honest,
needs to be
sometimes
approached
a very,
based
very
on
messy and
an
divided
understanding
country.
of the
Governor, would you
Constitution
like
and
to
how it applies
respond
to
and also
individual
answer the
human
question about
rights.
restrictions?
That's
You
what
know,
needs to
well,
be. Letting
the
some
question you
states
had
duck
asked
that
Donald
is
Trump
stupid.
made the accusation that wasn't true about Minnesota. Well, let me tell you about this idea that there's diverse states. There's a young woman named Amber Thurman. She happened to be in Georgia, a restrictive state. Because of that, she had to travel a long distance to North Carolina to try and get her care. Amber Thurman died in that journey back and forth. The fact of the matter is, how can we as a nation say that your life and your rights, as basic as the right to control your own body, is determined on geography? There's a very real chance, had Amber Thurman lived in Minnesota, she would be alive today. That's why the restoration of Roe versus Wade. When you listen to Vice President Harris talk about this subject and you hear me talk about it, you hear us talking exactly the same. Donald Trump is trying to figure out how to get the political right of this. I agree with a lot of what Senator Vance said about what's happening. His running mate, though, does not, and that's the problem.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, let me ask you about that. He mentioned, it was, I think, referring to a national ban. In the past, you have supported a federal ban on abortion after 15 weeks. In fact, you said if someone can't support legislation like that, quote, you are making the United States the most barbaric pro-abortion regime anywhere in the entire world. My question is, why have you changed your position?
Well, Nora, first of all, I never supported a national ban. I did during when I
Yes,
was
you
running
did.
for Senate in 2022 talk about setting some minimum national standard. For example, we have a partial birth abortion ban in place in this country at the federal level. I don't think anybody's trying to get rid of that, or at least I hope not, though I know that Democrats have taken a very radical pro-abortion stance. But Nora, you know, one of the things that changed is in the state of Ohio, we had a referendum in 2023, and the people of Ohio voted overwhelmingly, by the way, against my position. And I think that what I learned from that, Nora, is that we've got to do a better job at winning back people's trust. So many young women would love to have families. So many young women
Give them
also
back
see
their
an unplanned
autonomy
pregnancy
then.
as something that's going to destroy their livelihood, destroy their education, destroy their relationships. And we have got to earn people's trust back. And that's why Donald Trump and I are committed to pursuing pro-family policies, making childcare more accessible, making fertility treatments more accessible.
Give them their
because we've got to
autonomy
do
back.
a better job at that. And that's what real leadership is.
Your personal
Governor,
bullshit doesn't
I'm
dictate
gonna
other
respond
people's
on the
rights.
pro-abortion piece of that. No, we're not. We're pro-women. We're pro-freedom to make your own choice. We know what the implications are to not be that. Women having miscarriages, women not getting the care,
Gilead!
physicians feeling like they may be prosecuted for providing that care.
Margaret
And
Atwood.
as far as making sure that we're
Handmaid's
educating our
Tale.
children and giving them options, Minnesota's a state with one of the lowest teen pregnancy rates. We understand that too. We know that the options need to be available, and we make that true. We also make it, we're a top 3 state for the best place to raise children. But these two things to try and say that we're pro-children, but we don't like this, or you guys are pro-abortion, that's not the case at all. We are pro freedoms for women to make their choices. And we're going, and Kamala Harris is making the case, to make options for children more affordable, a $6,000 child tax credit. But we're not going to base that on the backs of making someone like Amber Thurman drive 600 miles to try and get health care.
Senator.
May I respond to that? First of all, Governor, I agree with you. Amber Thurman should still be alive, and there are a lot of people who should still be alive, and I certainly wish that she was.
Could be,
and maybe
your running
you're
mate.
free to disagree with me on this and explain this to me. But as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion. That is, I think,
That's
whether
not
you're
true.
pro-choice or
That's not how the law
pro-abortion,
is.
that is fundamentally barbaric. And that's why I use
Well,
that word,
okay,
Nora,
what
is
does that
because
have to do
some
with
of
her
what we've
life?
seen. Do you want to force Catholic hospitals to perform abortions against their will? Because Kamala Harris is supported
Are they getting
suing
state
Catholic
funding for
nuns, to
If they're
violate
getting
their
state
freedom
funding,
of
then
conscience.
yes.
We can be
Are they
in
getting
a
federal
secular
and state-
country where we're
If
respecting
they're
Yeah, if
the
they're
subsidized by
freedom
the
of
fucking
conscience
government,
and
yes.
make the country
If
more
we're
pro-
subsidizing them,
pro-family,
yes.
please.
They need to abide by a federal
Governor,
fucking
please respond.
standard.
Look, this is one where there's always something there. This is a very
If they're totally private, then yeah,
These are
go nuts,
women's
do whatever you
decisions
want.
to make about their healthcare decisions, and the physicians who know best when they need to do this. Trying to distort the way a law is written to try and make a point, that's not it
But
at
what
all.
was I wrong
This
about,
was-
Governor? Please tell me, what was I wrong
That is
about?
not the way the law is written. Look, I've given
But
this,
how?
I've given this advice on a lot of things, that getting involved, getting against, that's been misread, and it was fact-checked at the last debate. But the point on this is there's a continuation of these guys to try and tell women or to get involved. I use this line on this, just mind your own business on this. Things worked best when Roe versus Wade was in place. When we do a restoration of Roe, that works best. That doesn't preclude us from increasing
I
funding
disagree
for
with him on the
children.
restoration
It
of
doesn't
Roe. I want to
increase
go
us
further
from
than
making
that.
sure
but-
that once that child's born,
Oh,
like in
codified in
Minnesota,
the law.
they
Just
get
so- yeah,
meals.
just-
They get early childhood education. They get health care. So the hiding behind we're going to do all these other things when you're not proposing them in your budget, Kamala Harris is proposing them. She's proposing all those things to make life easier for families.
I asked a specific question, Governor. You gave me a slogan as a response.
It's not the case. It's not true. That's not what the law says. So they fact checked it with President Trump.
Gentlemen, there's a lot to discuss. We have to move on, and we're going to be right back with much more of the CBS News vice presidential debate in just a moment.
I gotta tell you, this is going better than I thought, and I'm a little bit hard right now. And not just because I got a new sofa waiting for me out in the living room either.
Woo! Got half a stock. Oh man. So, yeah, this is.
Oh,
I didn't think JD Vance would go that deep in the weeds.
When you wake up in the
This
morning,
like this
we
early
want to
on.
be
I mean,
your go-to team.
dude,
Nate
and
has
it's
one of the
funny
quickest minds I've
because
ever
Walz
seen.
isn't even really Walz isn't
Can you
baiting
mute
people.
them?
Feels comfortable. Gail
Is it not muted? I thought I muted
Yeah,
it.
no, it's still playing. At least I can hear it.
How's
There,
that?
there it is. It's muted. now.
Okay, cool. It was
Okay.
muted for me. It was muted for me because I muted it via the tab instead of on StreamYard. So
Oh,
sorry,
gotcha.
the stream is muted. Should be muted. We good? We solid? Yes. Okay. Good. We're good. So it was crazy because Walz isn't even baiting him. Walz, I mean, he's addressing the topics on hand. Yeah, I admit he stumbled a bit on the
Walz is being very, very charitable.
extremely charitable.
I didn't think he would go this route, but he's being like, "Hey, actually, I kind of agree with some of the things. Like, his running mate doesn't believe that shit." I'm like, all right, it's an interesting way to go. I think that whatever they did in terms of prepping him, I think they went along with his style. Like that.
I think
This is
so.
sort-
Yeah.
This is sort of like what he wants to do. The prosecutor and Kamala Harris was like, "Yeah, I'll say these 6 things to get this guy triggered. Fuck yeah, I will."
and then she practiced the bemused look. She did.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was just priceless. But I like this. PhD Tony, all good except we can still see you, Bridge. Oh, thanks, buddy. I appreciate that. And here I was. I took my beard down just like yours. So real quick before we get back to this, I want to get to these real quick before they go away. Let me see. Okay, we got that one because we had some stuff coming through, and I promised I would get to him. Super J Live for $5. Thank you so much for the super chat. Says y'all need to use a German accent when you talk sexy. I'm going
to try to remember that. I'm going to try to remember that. I made a note of that when I saw it. I'll do my best.
PhD Tony for 5 Australian says Donald Trump destabilized the international community by undermining treaties and abandoning strategic allies on a whim. Yes, he did. He set the stage for a lot of this shit to take place. And of course, P.H. Tony comes up again for 5 Australians is yes, no major conflicts during the Trump presidency because the autocrats of the world got what they wanted without any opposition. Agreed with that as well. Yeah, he set the stage for these problems, and that's why we have him. And Vance is just trying to deflect it over to say that the fact that these things are taking place during this administration, well, the stage was set during Trump's because of his inaction or, whatever. Colin, definitely not Cromwell. Thanks so much for being here. This is for 5 Freedom. Says, keep Ohio out of your mouths during debates. We are still dealing with the cats.
They're eating the dogs.
They're eating the dogs. Super J Live for 5 Freedom says the copium is real for the red. It absolutely is. Like there's some serious copium going on in there. PC Tony for $2 Australian says countries by per capita CO2. USA is 16th. China is 25th. So take that. And thank you so much, PhD Tony. And Super J Live for $5 Freedom says best mods ever. These girls are handling it. So I'm really enjoying it here. So thank you all so much for that. As usual, during a natural break, I will jump on any super chats or milestones. Yeah, I love seeing the milestones, how long people have been a member of the channel. So I'll jump on those during those breaks. I appreciate those coming in. Thank you all for that support. Fuck you, Kavanaugh. So this is intriguing. So I actually am kind of excited about this. And I love that some of, how succinctly he's put the pin in some of these things. He's coming off a fuck lot stronger than I was anticipating, So obviously some real prep was done here. And you can tell that I think that Vance may have gone kind of the Trump route, maybe did some prep, but he's just resting on, I feel like Vance is resting on his laurels and just resting on like the messaging. But,
maybe. It does seem like he's done prep.
No,
it feels like it. Yeah.
Generic prep.
Welcome back to the CBS News Vice Presidential Debate. We want to turn now to America's gun violence epidemic. The leading cause of death for children and teens in America is by firearms. Senator Vance,
gun violence.
You oppose most gun legislation that Democrats claim would curb gun violence. You oppose red flag gun laws and legislation to ban certain semi-automatic rifles,
universal background checks.
AR-15s. So let me ask you, earlier this year, for the first time, the parents of a school shooter were convicted of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Do you think holding parents responsible could curb mass shootings? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yes.
Yeah, well, Nora, on that particular case, I don't know the full details, but I certainly trust local law enforcement and local authorities to make those decisions. I think in some cases the answer is going to be yes, and in some cases the answer is going to be no.
You trust the experts?
And the details really matter here. Of course, for example, if a kid steals a gun, that's going to be different than if a parent hands over a gun knowing that their kid is potentially dangerous. But look, I want to just sort of speak as a father of 3 beautiful little kids, and our oldest is now in 2nd grade. And like a lot of parents, we send our kids to school with such hope and such joy and such pride at their little faces on the first day of school. And we know, unfortunately, that a lot of kids are going to experience this terrible epidemic of gun violence. And of course, our hearts go out to the families that are affected by this terrible stuff. And we do have to do better. And I think that Governor Walz and I actually probably agree that we need to do better on this. The question is just, how do we actually do it?
Red flag laws, universal background checks.
Bothers me and worries me about this epidemic of violence. The gross majority, close to 90%, and some of the statistics I've seen, of the gun violence in this country is committed with illegally obtained firearms. And while we're on that topic, we know that thanks to Kamala Harris's open border, we've seen a massive influx in the number of illegal guns run by the Mexican drug cartel. So that number, the amount of illegal guns in our country is higher today than it was 3.5 years ago. But what do we do about the schools? What do we do to protect our kids? And I think the answer is, and I say this not loving the answer, because I don't want my kids to go to school in a school that feels unsafe or where there are visible signs of security. But I unfortunately think that we have to increase security in our schools. We have to make the doors lock better. We have to make the doors stronger. We've got to make the windows stronger. And of course, we've got to increase school resource officers, because the
Ryan
idea
Walters
that we can magically wave a wand and take guns out of the hands of bad guys, it just doesn't fit with recent experience. So we've got to make our schools safer. And I think we've got to have some common sense bipartisan solutions for how to do that.
Governor, you have 2 minutes.
Background
I
checks.
think parents watching tonight, this is your biggest nightmare. Look, I got a 17-year-old, and he witnessed a shooting at a community center playing volleyball. Those things don't leave you. As a member of Congress, I sat in my office surrounded by dozens of the Sandy Hook parents, And they were looking at my 7-year-old picture on the wall. Their 7-year-old were dead. And they were asking us to do something. And look, I'm a hunter. I own firearms. The vice president is. We understand that the Second Amendment is there, but our first responsibility is to our kids to figure this out. In Minnesota, we've enacted enhanced red flag laws, enhanced background checks, and we can start to get data. But here's the problem. If we really want to solve this, we've got folks that won't allow research to be even done on gun violence. And this idea that we should just live with it, and here's what I do think, that this is a good start to the conversation. I 100% believe that Senator Vance hates it when these kids, it's abhorrent and it breaks your heart. I agree with that. But that's not far enough when we know there are things that work. I've spent time in Finland and seen some Finnish schools. They don't have this happen, even though they have a high gun ownership rate in the country. There are reasonable things that we can do to make a difference. It's not infringing on your Second Amendment. And the idea to have some of these weapons out there, it just doesn't make any sense. Kamala Harris, as an attorney general, worked on this issue. She knows that it's there. No one's trying to scaremonger and say we're taking your guns, but I ask all of you out there, do you want your schools hardened to look like a fort? Is that what we have to go? When we know there's countries around the world that their children aren't practicing these types of drills. They're being kids. We owe it to them to get a fix. These are things that shouldn't be that difficult. You can still keep your firearms and we can make a difference. We have to. If you're listening tonight, this breaks your heart.
Senator.
Tim, first of all, I
and
didn't
to
know
fact check him on that, no.
The
Axios poll from 66 to 2019, 77% of mass shooters purchased at least some of the weapons they use legally.
I think it illustrates
most is done with legal firearms.
Weird differences between our own country's gun violence problem and Finland is, okay, first of all, we have way higher rates of mental health abuse or mental health substance abuse. We have way higher rates of depression, way higher rates of anxiety. We unfortunately have a mental health crisis in this country that I really do think that we need to get.
I don't know that that's fair to say when Finland has the highest
violence problem,
one of the highest rates of
another driver of the gun violence epidemic,
self-termination.
Our kids, it doesn't earn as many headlines, but is the terrible gun violence problem in a lot of our big cities. And this is why we have to empower law enforcement to arrest the bad guys, put them away, and take gun offenders off the streets. I think there's a whole
we
host
need
of things
Walker,
that we can
Texas
do here,
Ranger to
but I
show
do
up
think
at
at our
those
schools
schools and
we've got to talk about more
karate kick
security.
the evil out
Senator,
of
thank
these
you.
kids.
Governor, you previously
They'll
opposed
never-
an assault
they'll
weapons
never
ban,
do that
but
again.
only later in your political career did you change your position. Why?
Yeah, I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look, the NRA, I was the NRA guy for a long time. They used to teach gun safety. I'm of an age where my shotgun was in my car so I could pheasant hunt after football practice. That's not where we live today. And several things I want to mention on this is talking about cities and where it's at. The number one where the most firearm deaths happen in Minnesota are rural suicides. And we have an epidemic of children getting guns and shooting themselves. And so we have, and we should look at all of the issues, making sure folks have health care and all that, but I want to be very careful. This idea of stigmatizing mental health, just because you have a mental health issue doesn't mean you're violent. And I think what we end up doing is we start looking for a scapegoat. Sometimes it just is the guns. It's just the guns. And there are things that you can do about it. But I do think that this is one, and I think this is a healthy conversation. I think there's a capacity to find solutions on this that work, protect Second Amendment, protect our children. That's our priority.
Gentlemen, thank you. Margaret.
Thank you, Nora. Let's turn now to the top contributor to inflation, the high cost of housing and rent. There's a shortage of more than 4 million homes in the United States, and that contributes to the high housing prices. Governor Walz, the Harris campaign promises a $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers and a $10,000 tax credit. They also promise to build 3 million new homes. Where are you building these homes, and won't handing out that kind of money just drive up prices higher?
No, it's not handing out. We have, first, let me say this issue of housing, and I think those of you listening on this, the problem we've had is that we've got a lot of folks that see housing as another commodity. It can be bought up, it can be shifted, it can be moved around. Those are not folks living in those houses.
That's capitalism.
Those of you listening tonight, That house is a big deal.
It's
bought
happening
and owned
all
one
over
house in
my
life.
city.
My mom
Clippers
still
all
lives in
over
the
the
house where I
place
was.
because
And
real
when I
estate is
think of a
low,
house,
so they're coming
I'm
in.
thinking of Christmas services after midnight mass where you go with your family. We need to make it more affordable. And one of the things, as I said, this program that the vice president is pushing forward and bringing a new way of approaching this is something we're doing in Minnesota from that lead. We in the state invested in making sure our housing was the biggest investment that we'd ever made in housing. It starts to make it easier. We cut some of the red tape. Local folks, look, we can't do it at the federal level, but local folks make it easier to build those homes. And then that down payment assistance. I can tell all of you out there, certainly for me, using the GI Bill was one thing, but a veteran's home loan, the big thing about a veteran's home loan is you don't have to pay the down payment. Those are things that make it there. Now, look, you're going to pay it back and you're going to pay your mortgage. Those are things that we know in the long run, the appreciated value, the generational wealth that's created from it. And I will give Minneapolis an example. Minneapolis is the one city where we've seen the lowest inflation rates. We've seen a 12% increase in stock because we put some of these things in, and we're implementing a state program to make sure we give some of that down payment assistance. We get it back from people because here's what we know. People with stable housing end up with stable jobs. People with stable housing have their kids able to get to school. All of those things in the long run end up saving our money. And that's the thing that I think we should be able to find some common ground in, but we can't blame immigrants for the only reason. That's not the case that's happening in many cities. The fact of the matter is that we don't have enough naturally affordable housing, but we can make sure that the government's there to help kickstart it, create that base.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, as far as your campaign's position, the promise is to seize federal lands to build homes, remove regulation, provide tax breaks, and cut back on immigration, which you say pushes up prices. Where are you going to build all the new homes you're promising? And what part of any of this plan will provide immediate relief? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Tim just said something that I agree with. We don't want to blame immigrants for higher housing prices, but we do want to blame Kamala Harris for letting in millions of illegal aliens into this country, which does drive up costs, Tim. 25 million illegal aliens competing with Americans for scarce homes is one of the most significant drivers of home prices in the country. It's why we have massive increases in home prices that have happened right alongside massive increases in illegal alien populations under Kamala Harris's leadership. Now, Tim just mentioned a bunch of ideas. Now, some of those ideas I actually think are halfway decent, and some of them I disagree with. But the most important thing here is Kamala Harris is not running as a newcomer to politics. She is the sitting vice president. If she wants to enact all of these policies to make housing more affordable, I invite her to
She
use
has
the
to
office
be
that the
president.
American people already gave her, not sit around and campaign and do nothing while Americans find the American dream of homeownership completely unaffordable. Now, you asked, Margaret, what would immediately change the equation for American citizens if you lower energy prices? As Donald Trump says, drill, baby, drill. One of the biggest drivers of housing costs, aside from illegal immigration, is, think about it. If a truck driver is paying 40% more for diesel, then the lumber he's delivering to the job site to build the house is also going to become a lot more expensive. If we open up American energy, you will get immediate pricing relief for American citizens, not, by the way, just in housing, but in a whole host of other economic goods too.
Senator Vance, you still have 23 seconds there. Do you want to answer?
Can I have it?
Where, Governor, we will get to you in a moment. But Senator, where are you going to seize the federal lands? Can you clarify?
Well, what Donald Trump has said is we have a lot of federal lands that aren't being used for anything. They're not being used for national park. They're not being used, and they could be places where we build a lot of housing. And I do think that we should be opening up building in this country. We have a lot of land that could be used. We have a lot of Americans that need homes. We should be kicking out illegal immigrants who are competing for those homes, and we should be building more homes for the American citizens who deserve to be here.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, I do want to let you respond to the allegation that the vice president is letting
That's a greasy smile.
Of course,
Did you see that?
and again, you have the facts. I guess we agree.
Nailed you,
Fact check.
fucker.
I'll
Suck
check
a
it.
butt.
Look, crossings are down compared to when Donald Trump left office. But it's, again, blaming and not trying to find the solution. I was going to ask, though, on this question, are we going to drill and build houses in the same federal land? And I think when people hear federal lands, these are really important pieces of land. Now, Minnesota doesn't have a lot of federal lands. I know in the western part of the countries we do. There's not a lot of federal lands in and around Minneapolis, for example. So the issue is I don't understand the federal lands issue unless we see this, and I worry about this as someone who cares deeply about our national parks and our federal lands. Look, Minnesota, we protect these things. We've got about 20% of the world's fresh water. These lands protect. They're there for a reason. They belong to all of us. But again, this is when you view housing and you view these things as commodities. Like there's a chance to make money here. Let's take this federal land and let's sell it to people for that. I think there's better ways to do this. We've seen it in Minnesota. We're able to refurbish some of these houses. We're able to make some investments. That gets people
Maybe
in.
they'll push towards the reservations.
On the fact on this, economists.
Tribal land.
Senator Vance, you said you don't like the economists. Which economists are saying that it is immigrants that's adding to the cost?
Governor,
Where's
your
the study?
time is up. But Senator, on that point, I'd like for you to clarify. There are many contributing factors to high housing costs. What evidence do you have that migrants are part of this problem?
Well, there's a Federal Reserve study that we're happy to share after the debate. We'll put it up on social media, actually, that really drills down on the connection between increased levels of migration, especially illegal immigration, and higher housing prices. Now, of course, Margaret, that's not the entire driver of higher housing prices. It's also the regulatory regime of Kamala Harris. Look, we are a country of builders. We're a country of doers. We're a country
you need
of
regulation.
But we increasingly have
Donald Trump's anti-regulation resulted in lost lives.
To develop our resources, makes it harder
Not
to
only
build
that,
things,
but they
and wants
never
to throw people in jail for not doing everything exactly as Kamala Harris says they have to do.
There isn't a builder out there that
you
doesn't
have a lot of people who would
the
love to
notion
build
of
homes who
commercial
aren't
zone
able to build
land
homes.
and
I actually agree with
residential
Tim.
zone lands
We should get out of
preserved
this
and
idea of
protected and
housing as a
enforced by
commodity,
courts
but the thing
for
that
a
has really
reason.
turned housing into a commodity
They're unique investment
is
opportunities
to
because
millions
of the
upon
imprimatur
millions
of the
people who
government
have no legal right
designating
to
them
be
as
here.
those kinds of
What
properties.
are the federal
He's
regulations?
an
I
idiot.
deal with
These
this
guys
as a
talk about this
governor.
kind of stuff like they're drawing
You
in
can very quickly
crayons.
reply.
I'm sorry.
Like they've
I get
never
this as a
benefited
governor,
from this shit
and I don't
before.
necessarily
They haven't
disagree
figured out
with
how to
that.
play
That in
around
some
in these-
cases,
these-
many of
these
those are
angles.
local, many of them are state. I don't know which ones are federal, but
When the
I think
ice
whenever
melts
we
in my
talk
glass, the water
regulations,
doesn't
people
overflow.
think they can get rid of them. I think you want to be able to get out of your house in a fire. I think you want to make sure that it's fireproof and those types of things. So which are the regulations? Because the vice president's not responsible for those. Congress writes those.
Governor, thank you. Gentlemen, we have a lot to
I'm
get to.
waiting
You're
for the
passionate
announcement to
about
come
the
out.
housing crisis.
Now
I
that
can
we've
tell.
got Trump in
But
for a
Nora,
second president,
you.
I can finally build a house
Problems
entirely
facing
out of
Americans is the
outdated
high cost
fireworks
of
stock.
healthcare. Senator Vance, at the last presidential debate, former President Trump was asked about replacing the Affordable Care Act. In response, he said, I have concepts.
I have
of a plan."
12%. I have 12%
Since then,
of a
Senator,
plan.
you've talked about changing how chronically ill Americans get health insurance. Can you explain how that would work? And can you guarantee that Americans with pre-existing conditions won't pay more? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, of course, we're going to cover Americans with pre-existing conditions. In fact, a lot of my family members have gotten health care. I believe, members of my family actually got private health insurance, at least for the first time, switched off of Medicaid onto private insurance for the first time under Donald Trump's leadership. And I think that, a lot of people have criticized this concepts of a plan remark. It's very simple common sense. I think as Tim Walz knows from 12 years in Congress, you're not going to propose a 900-page bill standing on a debate stage. It would bore everybody to tears, and it wouldn't actually mean anything because part of this is the give and take of bipartisan negotiation. Now, when Donald Trump was actually president, and again, he has a record to be proud of, prescription drugs fell in 2018 for the first time in a very long time. Under Kamala Harris's leadership, prescription drugs are up about 7%. Under Donald Trump's entire 4 years, they were up about 1.5%. He introduced pricing transparency. Think about healthcare. You go into a hospital, you try to buy something, and nobody knows what it actually costs. That price transparency will actually give American consumers a little bit more choice and will also drive down costs. And we
Well,
talked
you could have
about
had that with a single payer system.
Reinsurance regulations is what I was talking about. Look, Donald Trump has said
You're not going to
that
have
if
that
we allow
transparency with
states
multiple
to
private
experiment
insurance
a little bit
companies.
on how to cover both the chronically ill but the non-chronically ill. It's not just a plan. He actually implemented some of these regulations when he was president of the United States. And I think you can make a really good argument that it salvaged Obamacare, which was doing disastrously until Donald Trump came along. And I think it's
No, it wasn't. No, it didn't.
Of course, you don't have to agree
didn't
with
do it.
everything
It
that
made it more
Donald Trump has ever said.
It made it more
or ever
expensive because he
done.
got rid of the
But
mandate.
when Obamacare was crushing under the weight of its own regulatory burden and healthcare costs, Donald Trump could have destroyed the program. Instead, he worked in a bipartisan way to ensure that Americans had
Couldn't
access to
destroy it.
affordable
He tried
care.
to destroy it.
It's not
They wouldn't.
perfect, of course, and there's so
The
much more
only
that
thing
we
he
can
was able to do
but
was
I think
remove
that
the
Donald
mandate.
Trump has
Right.
earned the
To
right
buy.
to put in place some better healthcare policies. He's earned it because he did it successfully the first time.
No, he didn't.
All
He
right,
did
here's where
not.
being
He
an
even
old guy
admitted
gives
that
you
he
some
didn't go
history.
far enough.
I was there
He's
at the
campaigning
creation
now
of
that he
the
didn't go far
ACA.
enough.
And the reason it was so important is I come from a major healthcare state, home of the Mayo Clinic, home to Medical Alley, 3M, Medtronic, all of those. We understand healthcare. It's
Not
why
to mention
we're
what they
ranked
just
first
succeeded.
on
What they just succeeded
affordability
with
and accessibility
insulin.
and
So that
quality
was
of
a huge
healthcare.
win.
And so what I
Yep.
know is under Kamala Harris, more people are covered than they have before. And those of you listening, this is critical to you. Now, Donald Trump all of a sudden wants to go back and remember this. He ran on the first thing he was going to do on day one was to repeal Obamacare. On day one, he tried to sign an executive order to repeal
They called him a
the
traitor
ACA.
for voting for it.
He signed
For
on to a
voting not to get
lawsuit
rid of the
to
ACA.
repeal the ACA,
He was a
but
rhino.
lost at the Supreme Court. And he would have repealed the ACA had it not been for the courage of John McCain to
Boom.
save that bill.
Good call,
Now,
Jay.
fast forward, what that means to you is you lose your pre-existing conditions. If you're sitting at home and you got asthma, too bad. If you're a woman, probably not. Broke your foot during football, might kick you out. Your kids get kicked out when they're 26. Kamala Harris negotiated drug prices for the first time.
Actually, it was
with
younger than that.
Medicare. We have 10 drugs that will
was like
come
21.
online, the most common ones that'll be there. But look, this issue, and when Donald Trump said, I've got a concept of a plan, it cracked me up as a fourth grade teacher because my kids would have never given me that. But what Senator Vance just explained might be worse than a concept because what he explained is pre-Obamacare. And I'll make this as simple as possible because I have done this for a long time. What they're saying is, if you're healthy, why should you be paying more? So what they're going to do is let insurance companies pick who they insure because guess what happens? You pay your premium, it's not much. They figure they're not going to have to pay out to you. But those of you a little older, gray, got cancer, you're going to get kicked out of it. That's why the system didn't work. Kamala Harris will protect and enhance the ACA.
Governor, thank you. Senator, you have not yet explained how you would protect people with pre-existing conditions or laid out that plan.
Well, look, we currently have laws and regulations in place right now that protect people with pre-existing conditions. We want to
In the
keep those
ACA.
regulations in place, but we also want to make the health
Since
insurance
when?
marketplace function a little bit better. Now, what Governor Walz just said is
How?
actually not true. A lot of what happened and the reason that Obamacare was crushing under its own weight is that a lot of young and healthy people were leaving the exchanges. Donald Trump actually helped address that problem.
They
and he
weren't
did
able
so in a
to.
way that preserved people's access to coverage who had pre-existing
He
conditions.
removed the
But again,
mandate, which allowed younger people to
these
not
guys
pay
do
in.
is they make a lot of claims
opposite
about if
happened.
Donald Trump becomes president, all of these terrible consequences are going to
complete
ensue. But in reality, Donald
He's
Trump was
completely
president,
misrepresenting
inflation
what
was
they
low,
did.
take-home pay was higher, and he saved the very program from a Democratic administration that was collapsing and would have
No, he didn't.
collapsed absent his leadership. He did his job, which is govern in a bipartisan way and get results, not just complain about problems, but actually solve them.
Governor,
complained he didn't go
under
far
the Affordable Care
enough.
Act go up under
He
the Trump
still
administration?
is.
It's higher now that we've
It's
seen it go up.
back-
Look,
it's
people are
completely
using it.
back
The system
asswards.
works. And the question about this of young people or whatever, that's the individual mandate piece of this. And Republicans fought tooth and nail saying, well, Americans should be free to do this. Well, then
So
what
you
happens
think the
is
individual mandate's a good idea?
you shrink. I think the idea of making sure the risk pool is broad enough to cover everyone, that's the only way insurance works. When it doesn't, it collapses. You are asking pre-ACA where we get people out. Look, people know that they need to be on health care. People expect it to be there. And when we are able to make it, and we are making it this way, when we incentivize people to be in the market, when we help people who might not be able to afford it get there, and we make sure then when you get sick and old, it's there for you. Because I heard people say, well, I don't want to buy into Medicare or whatever. Good luck buying health care once you get past 70. So look, the ACA works. We can continue to do better. Kamala Harris did that. The way she made everything better was negotiating those 10 drugs on Medicare for the first time in American history.
Thank you. Margaret?
Can I address that?
I apologize. We're out of
Go
time.
ahead,
We have a
Laura.
number of subjects to discuss. Margaret?
Let's talk about families in
Having to say
America.
that. We have more things
There
to
is
do.
a child care crisis
Sure.
in this country, and the United States is one of the very few developed countries in the world without a national paid leave program for new parents. Governor Walz, you've said that if Democrats win both the White House and Congress, this is a day one priority for you. How long should employers be required to pay workers while they are home taking care of their newborns? You have 2 minutes.
I say 6 months.
Yeah, well, that's negotiable, and that's what Congress worked. But here's what the deal is.
Some
Americans
places would say a
you may
year.
work
I say
for a
6
big
months is a
company.
good
Look,
compromise.
we're home in Minnesota.
country
Some of
has
the largest
two.
Fortune 500 companies. Kamala Harris knows that in California. Those companies provide paid family medical leave. One is, I think they're moral and they think it's a good thing, but it also keeps their employees healthy. We in Minnesota passed a paid family medical leave. You have a child,
Romania.
and I had to go back to work 5 days after my kids were born. This allows you to stay home a certain amount of time. What we know is that gets the child off to a better start. The family works better. We stay in their employers. We get more consistency in that. So Kamala Harris has made it a priority. We implemented it in Minnesota and we see growth. That's how you become a pro-business state. But the negotiations on it, and here's the issue. Those big companies are able to offer it. Those of you out there who don't have it, just imagine what happens if you get cancer or your child gets sick. We know what
probably
happens.
a question that should have been asked to both
In
of these
some
guys
cases,
on the
that
stage.
means no paychecks.
Hey, can you guys
because you've
think
got
of a
no
crisis
protection on
America
that.
doesn't have, and what would
This
you
is
do
the
about that
case of an
non-crisis?
economy that Donald Trump has set for the wealthiest amongst us. He's willing to give those tax breaks to the wealthiest. He's willing to say, bust those unions up, do whatever. What we're saying is the economy works best when it works for all of us. And so a paid family medical leave program, and I will tell you, go to the families or go to the businesses and ask them. As far as childcare on this, you have to take it at both the supply and the demand side. You can't expect the most important people in our lives to take either our children or our parents to get paid the least amount of money. And we have to make it easier for folks to be able to get into that business and then to make sure that folks are able to pay for that. We were able to do it in Minnesota, and I'm still telling you this. We were listed as the best state. We're still in crisis on this. A federal program of paid family medical leave and help with this will enhance our workforce, enhance our families, and make it easier to have the children that you want.
Governor, your time is up.
I love
Senator,
Norway's
do you support
54
a
weeks of
national
statutory paid maternity leave at
program? And if
96%
so,
pay.
For how long should employers be mandated to pay their
dark
employees
place
while they are
indeed.
home taking care of
I
their
wonder if they just
newborn?
have a
You 2
tower
minutes.
with the eye
Yeah,
of
well, first of all,
Sauron
Margaret, a number of
looking
my
at everybody.
Republican colleagues and some Democrats too have worked on this issue, and I think there is a bipartisan solution here because a lot of us care about this issue. I mean, look, I speak from this very personally because I'm married to a beautiful woman who is an incredible mother to our 3 beautiful kids, but is also a very, very brilliant corporate litigator, and I'm so proud of her. But being
What does
a
that have to
working
do with
mom,
leave?
even for somebody with all of the advantages of my wife, is extraordinarily difficult. And it's not just difficult from a policy perspective. She actually had access to paid family leave.
I'm
because
not
she
hearing
worked
a
for
time
bigger
period here.
company.
6
But
months,
the cultural
12
pressure
months,
on young families and
3
especially
months.
young women, I think makes it really hard for people to choose the family model they want. A lot of young women would like to go back to work immediately. Some would like to spend a little time home with the kids. Some would like to spend longer at home with the
family
kids.
model in
We
the
should
Solomon
have a
vein.
family care
Lots of
model
wives,
that
lots of
makes
concubines.
choice
No one
possible.
agrees
And I
with
think
me,
this is a very important
but
substantive difference
Takes a community.
between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris's approach.
It
I mean,
really
look,
does
if you
take.
look at
It
the
takes
federal programs
villages
that we have
to support that
paid
kind of family
leave
model.
right
I'm
now,
all about
the
it.
Community
All
Development
about
Block Grant, and there's another block
just
grant
need
program that spends a lot of
the
money from the
authority.
federal government. These programs only go to one kind of childcare model. Let's say you'd like your church maybe to help you out with childcare. Maybe you live in a rural area or an urban area and you'd like to get together with families in your neighborhood to provide childcare in the way that makes the most sense. You don't get access to any of these federal monies. We want to promote choice in how we deliver family care and how we promote childcare because look,
What choice?
it is unacceptable. And, you know, of course, Tim and I have been on the campaign trail a lot the past 7 or 8 weeks. And one of the
needed
biggest
somebody to
complaints
take
I
care
hear
of my
from young
kids so
families
that I could go
is
back to
people
work.
who feel like
I
they
could
don't
spend the
have
top
options,
amount and get a Mary
like they're
Poppins,
choosing between going to work or taking care for their kids.
I
That is
could
an
get a hag.
incredible burden to put
She
on
might
American
eat one of the
families.
kids.
We're the only country that
Bargain
does it. I
basement
think we could
rates.
do a heck
And
of a lot better.
absolutely no one will fuck with a
Senator,
hag.
thank you.
House
You
is
have
safe.
also said, Senator Vance, many things about the American family. The Federal Reserve says parents will spend nearly as much on childcare as they do on housing each month. So I want to get your thoughts on this. President Trump recently said, as much as childcare is talked about as being expensive, it's relatively speaking not very expensive compared to the kinds of numbers we'll be taking in. Is President Trump committed to the $5,000 per child tax credit that you have described? You have 1 minute.
Well, what President Trump said, Margaret, I just want to defend my running mate here a little bit, is that we're going to be taking in a lot of money by penalizing companies for shipping jobs overseas and penalizing countries who employ slave laborers and then ship their products back into our country and undercut the wages of American workers. It's the heart of the Donald Trump economic plan. Cut taxes for American workers and American families, cut taxes for businesses that are hiring and building companies in the United States of America, but penalize companies and countries that are shipping jobs overseas. That's the heart of the economic proposal. And I think what President Trump is saying is that when we bring in this additional revenue with higher economic growth, we're going to be able to provide paid family leave, childcare options that are viable and workable for
no
a lot
Republican
of
administration is going to get any support from the private sector
Can you clarify
to
how that
prevent
will
labor
solve the
arbitrage. They're going to go
childcare
after
shortage?
labor arbitrage
Well,
with
because
this
as
country.
Tim said, a lot of the child care shortages, we just don't have enough resources
like he doesn't
going
know where
into
he
the
lives.
multiple people who could be providing family care options. And we're going to have to, unfortunately, look, we're going to have to spend more money. We're going to have to induce more people to want to provide child care options for American families, because the reason it's so expensive
with
right now
legislation?
is because you've got way too few people providing this very essential service.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, your ticket also has some child care tax
You know that
credit
people want that
proposals.
regulated.
Do you think Congress will agree to the $6,000 credit for newborns and $3,000 credit for children over the age of 6, as your campaign has promised? Is that realistic?
Well, if these members of Congress are listening to anybody, I can tell you, and this is the biggest issue. Everybody listening tonight knows. I mean, I'm sure they were shocked to hear it's not that expensive. And let's be clear, whether it's 5,000 or 6,000, that plays you about 3 or 4 months. Let's be clear.
I caught that too,
Nitty.
Nitty.
Because we got out of an imbalance on this. We thought we were going to get by not
Well,
paying
Vance,
people. I don't
what's
think
the-
Senator Vance or
what's
that
the
and I are that far apart. I'm not
conversation?
opposed to what he's talking about on options. We've done scholarships types of things. I think we need to be open to making the case. But the issue here is, the question you asked is, you're not going to pay for it with these tariffs. That's
Thank you,
just adding
Randolph.
another $4,000 on the family and taking less. So not only do they not get the money to pay for that, they're $4,000 in the hole. That's Wharton School. That's his alma mater. And so I think the issue here is, if those members of Congress, I can't believe they're not. When I go to businesses, sure, they'll talk about taxes sometime, but they will lead with childcare and they will lead with housing, because we know the problem is, especially in a state like Minnesota, we need more workers because our economy is growing, but we need the workforce.
Right.
Governor, thank you. We need to move on. Nora?
Let's talk about the state of democracy, the top issue for Americans after the economy and inflation. After the 2020 election, President Trump's campaign and others filed 62 lawsuits contesting the results. Judges, including those appointed by President Trump and other Republican presidents, looked at the evidence and said there was no widespread fraud. The governors of every state in the nation, Republicans and Democrats, certified the 2020 election results and sent a legal slate of electors to Congress for January 6th. Senator Vance, you have said you would not have certified the last presidential election and would have asked the states to submit alternative electors. That has been called unconstitutional and illegal. Would you again
'cause it
seek to
is.
challenge this
It
year's
is.
election results, even if every governor certifies the results? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, Nora, first of all, I think that we're focused on the future. We need to figure out how to solve the inflation crisis caused by Kamala Harris's policies, make housing affordable, make groceries affordable.
Dodge
And
out of
that's
that
what we're focused
pool
on.
real
I wanna answer your
quick.
question because you did
Dodging,
ask it.
dodging,
What President Trump has said is that there were problems in 2020.
Dodge,
and my own belief
dip,
is that
dive,
we can fight
and
about those
dodge.
issues, debate those issues
You can dodge a brick,
peacefully
you can
in the
dodge a
public
ball.
square, and that's all I've said, and that's all that Donald Trump has said. Remember,
you can dodge a
he
question
said
about
that
your
on January the
bullshit, you
6th,
can
the
dodge a
protesters ought to
ball.
protest peacefully. And on January the 20th, what happened? Joe Biden became the president. Donald Trump left the White House,
quote
and now,
Braveheart,
of course,
don't change the
unfortunately,
subject,
we
just
have
answer the
all of the
fucking
negative
question.
policies that have come from the Harris-Biden administration. I believe that we actually do have a threat to democracy in this country, but unfortunately, it's not the threat to democracy that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz want to talk about. It is the threat of censorship. It's Americans
Oh my
casting
God.
aside lifelong
Mother-
friendships because of disagreements over politics.
Oh my God.
It's big technology companies silencing their fellow citizens. And it's Kamala Harris saying that rather than debate and persuade her fellow Americans, she'd like to censor people who engage in misinformation. I think that is a much bigger threat to democracy than anything that we've seen in this country in the last 4 years, in the last 40 years. Now, I'm
As
really
opposed
proud,
to an organized
especially given that I
violent
was
riot
raised
to
by two
overturn
lifelong
the
blue-collar
certifying of a
Democrats,
vote.
to have the endorsement of Bobby
I'm
Kennedy
just throwing
Jr.
that
and
out there,
Tulsi
like as an
Gabbard,
example of something
lifelong
that we've
leaders
seen
in the
the past few
Democratic
years.
coalition. And of course, they don't agree with me and Donald Trump on every issue. We
No
don't
one
have
would.
to agree on every issue, but we're united behind a basic American First Amendment principle
No,
that we ought to
no, we're
debate
not.
our differences. We ought to argue about them. We ought to try
No,
to persuade
that wasn't a
our fellow
debate. That was an
Americans.
attack.
Kamala
Yeah.
Harris is engaged in censorship at an industrial scale. She did it during COVID.
The only
She's
debate
done it
that Trump
over a
is
number
having
of
with his
other
advisors
issues,
right
and
now
that to me
is
is a
what
much
quality
bigger
rope
threat to
is needed
democracy
to
than
string you
what
up on the
Donald Trump
gallows when you
said when he
disappoint
said
him.
that protesters should peacefully protest
That's
on
the
January the
only
6th.
thing he's
Governor?
worried about.
Well, I've
That's-
enjoyed tonight's debate, and I think there was a lot of commonality here. And I'm sympathetic to misspeaking on things, and I think I might have with the senator. But
me
there's,
too, man.
There's one though that this one is troubling to me, and I say that because I think we need to tell the story. Donald Trump refused to acknowledge this, and the fact is that I don't think we can be the frog in the pot and let the boiling water go up. He was very clear. I mean, he lost this election, and he said he didn't. 140 police officers were beaten at the Capitol that day. Some with the American flag, several later died. And it wasn't just in there. In Minnesota, a group gathered on the state capitol grounds in St. Paul and said, we're marching to the governor's residence and there may be casualties. The only person there was my son and his dog, who was rushed out crying by state police. That issue and Mike Pence standing there as they were chanting, hang Mike Pence. Mike Pence made the right decision. So, Senator, it was adjudicated over and over and over. I worked with kids long enough to know, and I said as a football coach, sometimes you really want to win, but the democracy is bigger than winning an election. You shake hands, and then you try and do everything you can to help the other side win. That's what was at stake here. Now, the thing I'm most concerned about is the idea that imprisoning your political opponents, already laying the groundwork for people not accepting this. And a president's words matter. A president's words matter. People hear that. So I think this issue of settling our differences at the ballot box, shaking hands when we lose, being honest about it, but to deny what happened on January 6th, the first time in American history that a president or anyone tried to overturn a fair election and the peaceful transfer of power. And here we are 4 years later in the same boat.
What the fuck is
I will tell you
JD Vance
this,
smiling
that
for?
when this is over, we need to shake hands this election, and the
Excellent
winner
question.
needs to be the winner. This has got to stop. It's tearing our country apart.
Margaret?
Senator Vance, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, well, look, Tim.
Hamburgers
First
matter.
of all, it's really rich for Democratic leaders to say that Donald Trump is a unique threat to democracy when he peacefully gave
clear
over
and present
power
danger.
on January the 20th, as we have done for
he
250 years in this
He
country.
didn't.
We are going to shake hands.
He
after
kept
this
telling
debate and
people that
after
he
this
didn't
election.
lose,
Of
man.
course, I hope that we win, and I think we're going to win. But if Tim Walz is the next vice president, he'll have my prayers, he'll have my best wishes, and he'll have my help whenever he wants it. But we have to remember that for years in this country, Democrats
The
protested
colossal
the results
prick
of
even
elections.
managed to sound
Hillary Clinton in
magnanimous.
2016 said that Donald Trump had the election stolen by Vladimir Putin because the Russians bought like $500,000 worth of Facebook ads. This has been going on for a long time. And if we want to say that we need to respect the results of the election, I'm on board. But if we want to say, as Tim Walz is saying, that this is just a problem that Republicans have had, I don't buy that.
Governor.
January 6th was not Facebook ads. And I think a revisionist history on this. Look, I don't understand how we got to this point. But the issue was that happened. Donald Trump can do it. And all of us say there's no place for this. It has massive repercussions. This idea that there's censorship to stop people from threatening to kill someone, threatening to do something, that's not censorship. Censorship is book banning. We've seen that. We've seen that brought up. I just think for everyone tonight, and I'm going to thank Senator Vance. I think this is the conversation they want to hear. And I think there's a lot of agreement. But this is one that we are miles apart on. This was a threat to our democracy in a way that we had not seen. And it manifested itself because of Donald Trump's inability to say. He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
Has she? It's a damning non-answer for you to not talk about censorship. Obviously, Donald Trump and I think that there were problems in 2020. We've talked about it. I'm happy to talk about it further. But you guys attack us for not believing in democracy. The most sacred right under the United States democracy is the First Amendment. You yourself.
Okay, the First Amendment can
Kamala
only
Harris
be
wants to
abridged
government
by the
big tech
government
to silence people
If
from
a
speaking
private
their mind.
entity
That is a
doesn't
threat to
want you to
democracy
speak,
that will
they
long
can
outlive
shut
this
you down.
present political moment. I would like
allowed
Democrats
to
and
do that.
Republicans to both reject censorship. Let's persuade one another. Let's argue about ideas, and then let's
Censorship
come together
has to come from the
afterwards.
government.
You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. That's the test. That's the Supreme Court test.
Tim, fire in a crowded theater. You guys wanted to kick people off of Facebook for saying that toddlers shouldn't
Senator,
wear
the governor
masks.
does
That's
have the
not
floor.
Fire in a crowded
wasn't it?
theater. That is criticizing the policies of the government, which is the right of every American.
Senator, the governor
But the
does
private
have the floor for 1
entities
minute
get to
respond
control
you.
what is said on their platforms.
I
That's
don't
the
run
point.
Facebook. What I
It
do
wasn't the
know
government.
Is I see a candidate out there who refused, and now again, and this I'm pretty shocked by this. He lost the election. This is not a debate. It's not anything anywhere other than in Donald Trump's world. Because look, when Mike Pence made that decision to certify that election, that's why Mike Pence isn't on this stage. What I'm concerned about is, where is the firewall with Donald Trump? Where is the firewall if he knows he could do anything, including taking an election, and his vice president's not going to stand to it? That's what we're asking you, America. Will you stand up? Will you keep your oath of office, even if the president doesn't? And I think Kamala Harris would agree. She wouldn't have picked me if she didn't think I would do that, because of course that's what we would do. So America, I think you've got a really clear choice on this election of who's going to honor that democracy and who's going to honor Donald Trump.
Governor, your time is up. Thank you, gentlemen. We will be right back with both of our candidates, the CBS News vice presidential debate.
Ooh, man, oh man. So Vance, fucking turd, man. I swear.
This guy, Jay Verse says, it's censorship, by the way. It's only illegal for the government to block it. Private entities are allowed to censor, but it's still censorship. Yeah, but that's the problem. The censorship that somebody like Vance is talking about is about government censorship, the government telling people they can't talk about something. And that's not really happening. Now, here's the thing that I think that a lot of people get confused about. The government can go to a private entity like Facebook and YouTube and say, hey, we've heard complaints from our citizens that this individual or these individuals are saying demonstrably false things about situation A or B or whatever, and say, they might be spreading misinformation or disinformation. You might want to take a look at that.
Right.
It's up to Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, whatever, if they want to cut that out. The government isn't shutting that off. Those platforms decide if they want to shut that off. And in many cases, they did. Until Elon Musk took over, turned it into X and decided that everything, I guess everything was game, unless you use the word cisgender, and then you get automatically censored by Elon Musk.
Hey, Crazy Cat, good to see you. Thanks so much for being here. I saw a bunch of names popping in here. I'm sorry I haven't gotten to say hi to everybody. Merlin, good to see you as well. Nitty, good to see you. Yep, what everybody's talking about private companies get to decide what goes on in their platforms. That includes YouTube. That includes, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter before Elon did the whole thing. Yes, they get to determine that, but there is some give and take with the government. But the government was literally not trying to say people can't say this. It's not a violation of the First Amendment.
The funny thing is hearing somebody like Vance say we're against censorship, even when it's happening from something like Twitter or Facebook. And it's like the kind of censorship that those private companies are engaged in is protected free speech, First Amendment activity. They're allowed to do that. You as the government are not.
Right.
And they keep coming out and saying no, we're against that one too. That should not be going on. Cool. You just need to change that amendment then. So,
and they're allowed to as a measure of protecting themselves from legal liability or legal culpability for the things that are said there, like because they can get drawn into that for the facilitation of anything that comes about of that speech. So they need to be able to protect themselves, and so that's why we allow private entities to do that. I can't go into a McDonald's and say whatever the fuck I want, and incendiary or inflammatory language that private entity gets to kick me out, and it's not a suppression of speech. That's saying that. I can do it out there on the sidewalk to a degree or whatever, but I cannot do it in a private establishment. And online platforms are essentially that business. Going into that business and using their stuff, using their infrastructure or their framework to say what you want doesn't work that way. So this is not hard. It's like not difficult to understand. It's like basic high school fucking government.
I mean, a lot of these kind of right-wing ghouls, like Musk and guys like Vance have been trying to play this off like we're against censorship in all of its forms. Like censorship from a private individual and in a private capacity is absolutely protected as part of the First Amendment. Like that is, you have the right to do that in your own private environment. You can.
Darren Delaney brings up, ask Alec Jones what talking crap does for a channel. It's like, when you engage in that shit, there's going to be repercussions. Now, Alex Jones owned that was his platform. He engaged in that. We saw the comeuppance of that. Other private entities are trying to make sure that when people come on their channels and do that shit, that they are not held accountable for that. That's the point. They can get drawn in for facilitating these scenarios. So that's why Discord's TOS is so tight right now. I mean, it's extreme, and they will kill a server for violations of their TOS because of that very thing.
Are they doing that now?
Yeah, I've heard of a few. Politics Discord has almost been killed a couple of times because of that. We're back.
Welcome back to the CBS News Vice Presidential Debate. It is now time for the closing statement. Senator Vance won the virtual coin toss and elected to go last. So Governor Walz, you are first. You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, Senator Vance. Thank you to CBS News. And most importantly, thank you to all of you. If you're still up and the folks who miss Dancing with Our Stars, I appreciate it. But look, the support of the democracy matters. It matters that you're here. And I'm as surprised as anybody of this coalition that Kamala Harris has built, from Bernie Sanders to Dick Cheney to Taylor Swift, and a whole bunch of folks in between there. And they don't all agree on everything, but they are truly optimistic people. They believe in a positive future of this country and one where our politics can be better than it is. And I have to tell you that that better than it is the sense of optimism that there can be an opportunity economy that works for everyone, not just to get by, but to get ahead. And the idea that freedom really means something, not the freedom of government to be in your bedroom or exam room, but the freedom for you to make choices about yourself. Now, look, we all know who Donald Trump is. He's told us, and as Maya Angelou said, believe him when he told you that. His first inaugural address talked about American carnage, and then he spent 4 years trying to maybe do that. Senator Vance tonight made it clear he will stand with Donald Trump's agenda. He will continue to push down that road. Excuse me. Kamala Harris gives us a different option. Now, I'll have to tell you, I'm going to be careful about the quotes, but there's one that Senator Vance said that does resonate with me. He said, Donald Trump makes the people I care about afraid. A lot of America feels that way. We don't need to be afraid. Franklin Roosevelt was right. All we have to fear is fear itself. Kamala Harris is bringing us a new way forward. She's bringing us a politics of joy. She's bringing real solutions for the middle class, and she's centering you at the heart of that. All the while asking everyone, join this movement, make your voices heard. Let's look for a new day where everybody gets that opportunity and everybody gets a chance to thrive. I humbly ask for your vote on November 5th for Kamala Harris.
Governor Walz, thank you. Senator Vance, your closing statement.
Plain,
Well, I
concise.
want to thank
I love
Governor Walz, you folks at CBS, and of course the American people for tuning in this evening. And one of the issues we didn't talk about was energy. And I remember when I was being raised by my grandmother, when she didn't have enough money to turn on the heat some nights because Ohio gets pretty cold at night and because money was often very tight. And I believe, as a person who wants to be your next vice president, that we are a rich and prosperous enough country where every American, whether they're rich or poor, ought to be able to turn on their heat in the middle of a cold winter night. That's gotten more difficult thanks to Kamala Harris's energy policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford a nice meal for your family. That's gotten harder because of Kamala Harris's policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford to buy a house. You ought to be able to live in safe neighborhoods. You ought to not have your communities flooded with fentanyl. And that too has gotten harder with Kamala because of Kamala Harris's policies. Now, I've been in politics long enough to do what Kamala Harris does when she stands before the American people and says that on day one, she's going to work on all these challenges I just listed. She's been the vice president for 3.5 years. Day one was 1,400 days ago, and her policies have made these problems worse. Now, I believe that we have the most beautiful country in the world. I meet people on the campaign trail
that's filled with illegals and flooded with
have
fentanyl.
the grace and generosity
no houses,
to ask me how I'm
except
doing.
the ones
And
filled
tell
with
me they're praying
violent-
for my family.
violent
What that has
immigrants.
taught me is that we have the greatest country, the
And
most
expensive
beautiful
food.
country, the most incredible people anywhere in the world.
But they're all
not
addicted
going
to
be able
fentanyl,
to
and a lot of them
achieve
are illegal.
their full dreams with the broken leadership that we have in Washington. They're not going to be able to live their American dream if we do
How
the
many of
same
them
thing that
are
we've been
addicted to
doing for the
fentanyl?
last 3.5 years. We need change. We need a new direction. We need a president who has already done this once before and did it well.
No,
Please vote for Donald Trump. And
He
whether
didn't.
you
He
vote
sucked.
for me or
He
vote for Tim
sucked.
Walz, I just want to say I'm so proud to be doing this, and I'm rooting for you. God bless you, and good night.
Senator Vance, thank you. And thank you both for participating in the only vice presidential debate of this election cycle.
She said
I'm
that like
Margaret
she's
Brennan.
grateful.
And I'm Nora O'Donnell. And a reminder, there are just 35 days until Election Day.
35
Please get out
days.
And vote. And for all of us here at CBS News, thank you and good night.
Good night.
Oh, okay.
Oh, man.
Best thing about that debate, the smoke show mods.
Smoke show mods. So, definitely turned out differently than I thought it was going to. I thought that I was concerned. Yeah, not a complete shit show.
Not a total train wreck.
You know, it was good. I'll actually, and this is you know, feel the temperature of the ground. I'm actually going to agree with Jim Bob. Because Made by Jim Bob was in the chat there briefly. He may still be in the chat right now, but I'm going to agree with this. At least they're talking policy, and I will agree with that. It's like we have two people up there talking policy. I mean, obviously there were some, you know, there were some shift offs, you know, like some, but not as much. This was not the bait. This is not the fishing, you know, the baiting quest that the first one was.
It wasn't a shit show in the sense that it didn't have that palpable hostility,
right,
that some of the other debates have. But at the same time, the idea that it's just your basic kind of prime time debate where they're going to kind of talk past each other, that was still very much on display. Like
right.
that we weren't going to be able to get past that. But
it was to see an actual, like, you know, conversation in between. And like I said, there's not much for JD Vance to attack Walz on, and Walz could go the same route. And I think it was smart they didn't go the same route as Kamala, tried to bait him, do the exact same thing, because it makes him kind of look like a puppet of hers. Like, you know, like his, you know, like he doesn't extend far from her. But I like that he brought that Midwestern folksy, you know, kind of like, this is our approach, and he knows what he's talking about. He came, you know, I mean, he stumbled a bit on the first question and the whole China issue, but he came clean on that one. Humility there, which was good. And he said that the things he cited during fact checking, when we were fact checking it and looking like, they were correct. The stats bear those things out. Whereas Vance lied numerous times through his fucking teeth. Although I would say not to the extreme degree that Trump did. Because, I mean, like, virtually everything Trump said was a fucking lie. Vance said a lot, you know, but...
most of Trump's were whoppers. Vance's were like lies of omission, or he was misrepresenting something, or the one that he was talking about where I think he was trying to say, like, oh, there's this number of, like, illegal immigrants in the country, and we're flooded with fentanyl. It's like, look, the amount of fentanyl that has come into the country from the border is not the same as the fentanyl that has been captured at the border. And oftentimes the statistic of how much has been caught there is used by right-wingers to say, well, this is how much fentanyl came into the United States. Like, no, they caught like 95% of its attempt. Like it usually gets caught. So, if they caught like X number of tons of fentanyl, don't say that, well, there's X number of tons of fentanyl just floating around the United States for any kid or grandma to get. Like, no, that's what Border Patrol picked up. And over 90% of that is brought in by American citizens that are either acting on their own or working with cartels to do it, because they can easily cross in. They're not likely to get checked. So
I am Jedi One says no pets were eaten this time around. LOL. Yes. Yeah, we didn't bring it up, although we hinted at it, but we didn't get broached, which I think was smart.
I think if there was going to be a round 2 of this debate, the important thing to do for Walz is to walk out dressed like the sofa or Cherry the chair from Pee Wee Herman, just to see what Vance does,
was it? No pets were eaten, and 8:30 Dawes said that was almost a normal debate.
Yeah,
boring as hell.
Yeah, it was boring as hell. Randolph says, do you think the debate would have been more difficult for JD Vance if Tim Walz was wearing a pendant of a sofa? I think it would have been more, like I said, I think like if Margaret or Nora were wearing really thick shoulder pads that resembled like the edges of maybe, a couch or something, I think he would have been a little bit more distracted, a little bit more red in the cheeks. Well, I certainly wouldn't harm the couch, if that's what you mean.
8:30 also couldn't watch you all because I was watching at a friend's house. It's all good. I'm glad you popped in to say hi. I do appreciate you being here. Thank you very much. Colin Devin Cromwell says should have invested in the Bluetooth earrings.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking the entire time. I'm like,
here's something interesting. Jay Field says I would vote for Vance over Trump. Praise Cthulhu. There is another choice. If Vance was running for president, I mean, if you had a choice, if you say you were primarying and it was Vance was going up against Trump, you'd put Vance ahead. You'd put Vance in the seat to be the nominee instead of Trump.
I mean, if the Republicans had a functioning party and they were in a regular primary, Vance should win. Vance, unfortunately, had to mutate all of his positions to be like, the sort of weird, like, onward Christian soldier, Ninja Turtle take, or whatever the fuck he's doing now. This sort of like, Handmaid's Tale knight to Trump. So
Raven Darker says, okay, I'm not getting the sofa reference. Do you want to break it down?
It's Sofa King obscure. It's so fucking luxurious. If you don't know, somebody spread a rumor that there was a portion of Hillbilly Elegy that included an admission from the author, JD Vance, that he had sex with, I think it was a lubed latex glove between like a couch cushion. Like he put it under the couch cushion, and then he then proceeded to fuck that. So from that point on, there has been this JD Vance fucks couches meme that has been really popular and very, very durable. And so now, yeah. And it's not true. It's not in the book. Somebody invented it and threw it out there.
Mr. Walz is Tim Walz took a brutal swipe at JD Vance over a baseless but much shared claim that Trump's vice president pick admitted to having sex with a couch in his memoir. I can't wait to debate the guy. That is, if he's willing to get off the couch and show up. But his comment referred to a story that spread like wildfire on social media after being first shared on X by user Rick Rude's Calves. Can't say for sure, but he might be the first VP pick to have admitted in a New York Times bestseller to fuck an inside-out latex glove shoved between two couch cushions. The story was swiftly debunked by the AP, and in fact, checking piece titles, "No, JD Vance did not have sex with a couch," but later retracted it, prompting a barrage of memes on social media. Google Trends data revealed that during the last week of July, people Googling JD Vance couch blew past queries for Trump shooting. The volume around the trend is still very high. The president nearly assassinated, VP fucks couch.
The important thing about this, there is a very popular political concept in campaigning called "don't think of an elephant." Right? This is used in the movie Inception There's an exchange of dialogue. There's a book by George Lakoff called Don't Think of an Elephant. It's very important. If you come up with a narrative and the counter narrative requires the support and the restatement of that narrative, you are doing your opposition's work for them. So the idea is, if you want your supporters to stop thinking of a thing, you don't tell them to stop thinking of the thing directly. So don't think of an elephant. What's the first thing that you think of? You think of an elephant. So when you do the thing like, oh, you know what? And this is perfect. Like, you know what happened? I heard that JD Vance fucked a couch. And then when they asked this question, JD Vance and other supporters are like, no, he never did that. He does not fuck couches. As soon as you do that, it reinforces the mental idea.
That's all I'm seeing.
That couch fucking is occurring in relation to the existence of JD Vance as a person. It's beautiful.
Oh, wow. Okay, so as usual over on Truth Social, it is blowing up. Thank you, Yahooligan. Thank you, Justin, for sharing this over to me. Says from Real Donald Trump says, did Tampon Tim just say he has become friends with school shooters? So yes, there was a bit of a gaffe where he said that. We do understand what he was trying to say. He was trying to get all that information out in one deal. He did accidentally gaffe, and it came off like he said that. But as the people in this live chat understood what he was trying to say, obviously they like. But then Trump says he isn't even qualified to be governor, let alone vice president. Walz and Kamala do not have what it takes. Then Donald Trump, that was 47 minutes ago, 36 minutes ago, says, I thought Nora was fired from CBS for low ratings. Why is she still on? Because obviously she wasn't fired for low ratings. And then Donald Trump says, 21 minutes ago, CBS is lying again about the 2020 election. Where is my apology from Leslie Stahl? She claimed that the Hunter Biden laptop from hell was not real and that my campaign wasn't spied on. CBS is fake news. So Trump is already, or True Social, whoever is whether it's him or somebody else tweeting for him. But yeah, it's the typical same bullshit. I am Jedi One for 10 freedom dollars. Says thanks for all the fishes. You're very, very welcome. Appreciate that. You rock.
I'll be right back in a second.
Cool. Andrew Christopherson, thanks so much for being here. Says, well, that debate was fun. This was a heck of a lot better than I thought it was going to be. That I wasn't 100% sure if this was going to be a shit show or if it was just going to be kind of like, milquetoast boilerplate, whatever. But they both, they both brought it. They, kind of like, there's some shots across the bow here and there, but nothing overly extreme. And it was nice to see, two people behaving like adults, discussing policies on that. And I dug that. Same thing happened, say at the previous debate, this happens often. You get in front of that you get in front of that camera and you start gunning, you start going. It can be, especially in situations, I've had it happen to me when I've been on debate, especially when I started debating, when I, back in like 2019, when I started doing it regularly, you have that nervous energy, but then you kind of find your groove about a quarter of the way through and you start going into clips. Same thing happened with Walz. Same thing happened with Kamala Harris. And I think Vance to a degree, Trump just out the gate lying. So, in that one, I'm glad this went better than I thought it would, and I was really, really pleased with Walz's performance. And JD Vance pretty much just did exactly what we thought he was going to do, just not as extreme as Donald Trump.
He did himself a huge favor. He didn't. And I'm sure like a lot of mainstream media is going to be like, he didn't come off as insane. He didn't come off as unhinged. At no point did he do what Trump did and yell, they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats, they're eating the pets of the people who live there. They're eating the pets.
They ate the marmot. The marmot and the chinchilla. And
I wanted to ask you about that because I done a little bit of coverage about this, and I don't know if you've noticed. I don't know if you pay attention, but Doug from Pine Creek has been putting out a lot of pro-Trump apologetics, shorts and stuff.
Yeah.
And his on that one was to put out this thing saying like, well, yeah, maybe 1% of them are into like the voodoo. And they do the animal sacrifice. It's like, yeah, a goat, a pig, or a chicken. They don't eat people's pets, bro. That doesn't get you from one to the other. Do you know what a fucking non sequitur is? I mean, you've been doing this shit for a long time. Come on now.
Fucking Doug, man. I don't know how you deal with him. I mean, that dude's going so off the fucking rails that
the last one I did was like, I think that's probably the end, because I don't think that he's actually like reading any comments that I leave on any of his streams. Because I think I might be blocked. I'm not sure. Or they're just getting, YouTube could be blocking them because I think it's figured out that he doesn't like me. But the last one that I did, I don't know if, I think you were around for a little bit of it. The one where the rich people don't have to commit sexual assault because they can just pay. I mean, at that point, I'm like, okay, dude, you are wandering into like cartoonish supervillain here. I mean, honestly, I got to tell you, when you were telling me about, I kind of forgot. October 1st kind of snuck up on me. It surprised a lot of people. I'm like, oh my God, it's the 1st already. I was hoping that Vance would do something equivalent to what Doug did. where he said something that, like, one of the 5 things that Doug said in that video, like, come on, Vance, just say it. Women shouldn't be allowed to vote or something. Just say one of those. Say it out loud in the debate.
Come on, Trump. Just say the N-word. You want to say it.
Exactly.
You want to say it.
Just end it.
Just come clean. Just come clean and speak your truth. Speak your truth. I do. I mean, Pine Creek's rhetoric. I do expect the whole. Dun-dun-dun. I really do. Just as insane as he's getting. I mean, the whole rich people, have money so they don't have to commit sexual assault thing was absolutely insane. I don't know where he's getting this bullshit, but
books from the 1950s, as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
I'm like, I was actually just watching a movie, Coogan's Bluff. There's an example of this mentality in Coogan's Bluff. Trump represents it himself. Anytime somebody's asked him about like his victims, he's always tried to say, oh, well, she's not my type. I'm not attracted to her. She's ugly. She's old, whatever. Like that's for people that is not an apologetic that works. That is for people that think that your motivation for attacking someone was because you were lustful of them. But that's not what motivates that kind of attack. You're a creep. That's what motivates that kind of an attack. And there's a scene in Coogan's Bluff where this woman is standing in if anybody doesn't know Coogan's Bluff, he's an Arizona cop. He goes to forcibly extradite a criminal back to Arizona. He goes to New York City. So he's this fish out of water story. He's in a precinct in New York, and this older woman is standing there accusing like 3 or 4 different people of sexual assault. And there's this shot of him like looking her up and down and realizing how old she is. She's got like the heavy ankles, and she's very old. She's not attractive. And she looks like she lives on like Frosted Flakes and cigarettes. And the whole thing is set up behind that. Like, well, clearly she's insane, because no one with any real desire would commit these crimes. Like, that's not how that works. That movie was made in 1968. We've come a long way. Even back then, movies being made in the late 60s, it was still like, okay. And that's where Doug's stuck. Doug is stuck in the late 60s.
So it's already been memed. I've become friends with school shooters, Tim Walz. So that's been memed. So that's going around on Truth Social, and Donald Trump is 18 seconds ago. JD crushed it.
Do you think he was trying to say like I've talked to them?
I think he was trying with either the victims of school shooters or the parents of victims of school shooters.
Okay, yeah,
is where he's going with that. Yeah. So Trump, this came, I guess, 18 seconds ago. JD crushed it. Walz was a low IQ disaster, very much like Kamala. Our country would never be able to recover from an administration of these two. Can you imagine them representing us with sharp, fierce foreign leaders? I can't. So, and yes, I can. I can, absolutely. And I think that Harris would hold her ground, no problem. Not an issue at all.
If you've prosecuted crimes in an LA court, then you can probably hold your ground in an international arena. I mean,
well, this has been an absolute blast. This stream went really, really well. It went a heck of a lot better. So this was a lot of fun. I hope all of you out there had fun. I love the commentary. I love the comments rolling in, and thought we did pretty good. So if there is another presidential debate, which I don't know if there will be, but if there is, I can guarantee.
I'm
if there
here
is,
for it.
I guarantee that we will stream that as well, and we'll see what happens between Harris and Trump. See what goes down with that bullshit. Jefferson, anything new coming up on your side?
I am going to try to make it onto the Sunday show on Randolph's. I don't often get on there, but I'm going to try that this weekend.
Sweet.
I'll probably try to get a live show off either Thursday after work or Friday, depending on what I can kind of cobble together. I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to be looking at, but we'll see.
Cool. And I've got new content coming up on my channel as well. Really, really good stuff. And I think that you all will enjoy. And of course, we've got the Stage of Reason coming up on the 20th of October. And let me double check that. I want to double check and make sure that's in the events panel, because we had a little bit of a snafu in September, but we made it work. But it's supposed to be every third Sunday. And Stage of Reason, Sunday, October 20th. At 10 a.m., we will be doing that. The stream will go live at 9:30. So Sunday, October 20th, we will get the stage. We will be back on the Stage of Reason. I have yet to determine who my guest is going to be, but I'm sure that you will enjoy them. So yeah, we got that going on. So all kinds of cool stuff coming down the pipe. It is amazing. And of course, Darwin to Jesus. I invited him to come into the stream and talk about his stuff because he wanted to school me so bad. I invited him. I said, come on in. We'll chat. He only wants me to be over on Twitter Spaces. Like, he made a big deal of it. Like, he wants me to go over to Twitter.
I have not watched that video yet. It's on my to watch list. I've still not seen it yet.
He's like, come on over to Twitter Spaces. I've got 22,000 followers. Like that. I was like, I don't really use X. It's predominantly it's not because of Elon or like that. I don't use X because it facilitates CP. That's a really a massive problem that Elon has not fixed. And I don't really want to use that. Not to mention, it's just a fucking cesspool of just bullshit.
It's bad. I mean, I use it to flog, when I go live. Other than that, I don't get on it much. I find it kind of depressing, like X and Facebook, both.
Yes.
I go in there and I clear notifications and then try to get the hell out of there. Like they're both just, ugh.
Yeah, it's just cesspools at this moment. So pretty much YouTube is where I'm at. So I invited him, Discord or YouTube, and he actually talked. Someone told me in my chat over on the Discord, which the Bridge the Divide Discord link is down in the description if you'd like to join us over there. But someone told me over there that Down to Jesus, sorry, that he actually engaged with. I think he engaged with what was it? Logic. Was it, or was it somebody else?
Logic?
No, who would say? No. Oh, hang on a second. I'm trying to find it. Twitter Space, hashtag blah, blah, blah. Why use Twitter Spaces? It's a broken, janky ass thing. Doesn't even work 90% of the time. That's true. Yeah, Logic. He talked with Logic on Discord. So he talked with Logic on Discord, said wasn't a problem there, but now he refuses to do it here. So I offered Discord, I offered YouTube, neutral platform. He doesn't want to. So, if you happen to see this Down to Jesus, you're more than welcome. Come on over. Or we could do it on Jefferson's channel. We could do it on a neutral platform where I'm not the moderator. I prefer not to have moderation when I'm having a chat with people, because I don't want the image. I don't want the image of, or the optics of impropriety. I want to look like, it's neutral. I'm not going to shut you down. I wouldn't do it anyway because I've done it multiple times, but it's so much easier if a neutral person handles it. So I'd love to have that chat. Or Justin could do it as well. On Skeptic Spin, we could do it there. There's a number of places, that won't mod you, that won't shut you down. I'm not going to Twitter Spaces because I don't like that platform, and it's
Justin's is more neutral. I'm fully in like the scumbag left category.
All right, so all kinds of good stuff. I want to thank everybody in the live chat. Thank you all for the super chats. Thank you for the milestone chats. I love seeing how long you guys have been part of the channel. If you want to join and become a member and join the Godless Army and get access to all the cool emojis and stuff I made for you, the link is in the description. If another debate takes place, we will stream it here. More content on the way. I appreciate everybody. The beard will eventually grow out, so I hope you all have a fantastic night. I've been JL. This is Jefferson Spatchcock. You guys rock, and as always, be safe. Be excellent to each other. And together we can bridge the divide. Vote Harris Walz.
Yes. Vote for Harris Walz.
Yeah.